Mike Murray.
This is SNL.
SNL
By the numbers.
Numbers.
Smart, Nate, REG, Keaton, Bilber, Mulaney, Paul Rock, Short Charlie. There's the opening haiku for you. My name is Mike Murray, and this is SNL By The Numbers, the home of SNL stats. 10 episodes down, SNL 50 ahead, 10 episodes left. There's a secret second haiku for you. This podcast is a presentation of LateNighter.com. And we have some fairly breaking news in the SNL world. So I want to introduce my guests and get their take on it. First of all, Jon Schneider back with me. Happy New Year to you, my friend.
Happy New Year, Mike. It's never too late to say Happy New Year, so always glad to be with you.
I mean, yeah, I once got Happy New Year in March, to quote, Seinfeld. But anyway, I'll go to you first, and I can't wait to introduce our second guest. But January 18th, we are back with Dave Chappelle. So first reaction from you on that, and then...
Well, I know everybody's very happy about this, but
yeah,
Dave Chappelle returning for the fourth time to host. I think that, we haven't got to talk about it on the podcast yet. Interesting choice here. Definitely, unexpected for the first episode of 2025. The only times he has hosted has been 42, 46, 48, right after some election and, the results and talking about that. I know that a lot of people, he's beloved and idolized in a lot of comedy circles. And for others, he has said comments that people really don't agree with and are uncomfortable by. So certainly a polarizing figure. Regardless, SNL has chosen him to host this weekend, and we will be there to cover it and talk all about it. And music from Glorilla.
Absolutely. Glorilla. So I'm so excited to introduce the second guest, somebody who I've been following for a very long time, finally at SNL By The Numbers, and I can't wait to get the great Dennis Perkins' opinion on Glorilla. Dennis, what do you have on Glorilla?
Pass. I'm old. I don't know Glorilla. That's one of those people that I'm gonna have to hit the YouTube and the Wikipedia and sorry Glorilla fans, but look at the beard. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But anyway, what I really want to ask you about is I think a lot of us were anticipating, okay, if we're going to get Chappelle in season 50, he's somebody who's been here a lot. Lauren loves a good controversy host once a year, and there's an election. So we had an election, and it ended up being Bill Burr post-election episode. And so maybe people thought, oh, we dodged the Chappelle bullet. But here we are 2 days before inauguration. What was your reaction to seeing Chappelle on the 18th coming up this week?
Disappointed. I'm not surprised. Disappointed. I'll have a lot to say about Dave Chappelle in my review, I guess, when that comes out. He'd hosted once before, after the controversy started. And the controversy, not to dance around it, is he says some really hateful stuff about trans people and the LGBTQ community. And it's really disappointing because I idolized him. I still do as a technician, as a craftsman, as a student of comedy. I admired. There aren't many better, but it's that I don't know. There, especially for male comics of a certain type whose brand is brash, wisdom dropper. They can disappear in an instant if they start believing their own hype and they jump onto a train that I think is pretty lousy. It's a bummer all around, but I'm not surprised. I mean, Lauren loves controversy, like you said. Lauren loves ratings, and this will get both. And I think Lauren in his 80s, I mean, in his comments when he's talked about, he's jumped on the kind of, cancel culture is ruining comedy kind of tack. And I think there's a certain stubborn, kind of bloody-minded old white guy energy to Lauren at this point. And if people tell him he can't do something, he's going to do it.
That's definitely for sure. Lauren did just turn 80, and we saw Dave Chappelle on stage last season in the Dakota Johnson episode. He just, all of a sudden, we saw Chappelle at the Goodnights. So I'm not surprised that we're getting him. But from a stat perspective, let's put it that way, I'm interested in how long this monologue will be, because they've all been very long and 15-minute monologue. So it does impact the actual sketch comedy of the show.
Sure.
John?
Can I just say from a stat perspective, that's a great note, because I will put it out there for anyone at the show that is listening, because he is hosting this weekend, whether you like it or not, he is going to. I would challenge the show to push Dave Chappelle into sketches more, because let's not rely on the idea that the guy is going to eat up so much time with his monologue that he can get away with that being the thing that we're all going to talk about from the episode. I would love to see if maybe a truncated monologue from him this weekend, and him being in more segments of the show, because I think he's one of the, statistically, he's one of the hosts that has hosted the most while appearing in the least amount of average segments. So on an average night that he hosts the show, he truly hasn't been in a lot. Now, one of those is that he hosted in season 42 when there was, season 46 when there was the COVID, restrictions and stuff like that. But, it just feels like when Chappelle hosts, the show really caters to him. And I would be very curious if maybe this week we could have him cater to the show a little bit more while we still have this chance to put that out there.
Right. And just as a refresher, of course, we'll be doing stats coverage next week to talk about how long that monologue is. But season 42 monologue, 11 minutes 19. Season 46 monologue, 16:19. Season 48 monologue, 15:01. So we're averaging well over 12 minutes and topping out at over 16 minutes. So I'm going to assume it'll be a long monologue this time. But let's pivot to the January 25th show. This is a fascinating call. I just saw a film in theaters for the first time since January 1st, 2020. The last film I saw was Cats, the musical, the movie. And I finally saw a new movie. It was called The Complete Unknown, starring Timmy Chalamet, host of the next episode, who's doing double duty. So whether that's as Willy Wonka or Bob Dylan remains to be seen. Maybe it'll be his rap character from the Pete episode. We don't know yet, but it's Oscar season and we're going to find out. So John, this is a interesting one for a historical perspective to have a non-musician do double duty. So I just want your reaction on that first.
Sure. I mean, yeah, very exciting stuff. The show would try so many different style changes and format changes in its early years that it feels like it's complete whiplash to go from, the reaction to the 18th to the 25th. Like my neck hurts from being like, everyone's just to getting excited for this one. So for me, I think this is fascinating. This is exactly what we all wanted in season 50, was to have episodes and moments that reminded us about what makes the show so great, and a lot of that is when the format breaks. So I think when you have a guy who's a traditional actor coming in and performing on the show and truly like taking over the show in a way that is exciting and refreshing, it's almost as if a lot of people are really looking to skip this week and then go to the next one. But for me, Mike, this is very exciting.
Yeah, we'll just have to ask Timmy, how does it feel to be on your own? Because it'll be the Timmy show that night. So Dennis, what do you think about that call? Were you a fan of his last couple host appearances? And we've gotten a lot of season 46 hosts back this year. This is two more coming up right now.
Yeah, Timmy. Whatever. I mean, yeah, I think correct me if I'm wrong. I got two experts in the room, but I think the closest analogy I can come up to was way back when Gary Busey did something similar, where he was host and I know he sang. I don't remember if he was the musical guest, but it was when he was Oscar nominated for the Buddy Holly story. So, I mean, there are parallels there. As far as this is a giant. He's as inexplicable as maybe I see it sometimes. Timmy is one of the biggest stars in the entire world, and he just did a musical biopic where he did his own singing. So it makes sense. Lauren would say, "Hey, turn the keys over." Absolutely.
So I think the closest parallel probably is Lily Tomlin performing in season 8.
Okay.
She performed as an alter ego, Purvis Hawkins.
Right.
And yeah, that I would say would be the closest parallel to me. I mean, from a traditional musician standpoint, I know Garth Brooks performed as an alter ego as well. There's no official announcement on if Timmy's going to perform as Bob Dylan or something like that, where it sort of is an alter ego performing. But I would say that there's never truly been a just flat out actor being the official musical guest of their episode. There's been actors who have performed music, like I think of, or even like Rick Nelson, maybe as an example. Or even
Bruce Willis, right?
Bruce Willis did. He performed with a band, I think, between shots as well. There was also Deion Sanders who performed. He's an athlete, but yeah, I mean, it's very unique, and that's the fun part of the show's a half a century old, and they're still finding ways to reinvent themselves. That's exactly what we all want.
And to Dennis's point, season 4, episode 14, back March of '79, Gary Busey host. There was a slated musical guest, UB Blake and Gregory Hines. So that was a situation where it was, sometimes you see articles that will mention the Gary Busey one. So I'm glad you brought it up. But there was definitely also other performances where Chalamet, he is billed as both.
Mm-hmm.
And I think UB Blake performed in his 90s on the show and was the oldest musical guest to ever perform on the show.
Yep.
Interesting. So I can't wait for that. I mean, it's going to be a situation where it will maybe a rare occurrence. I mean, I'm someone who likes musical performances on SNL, but people will be, all right, get through the monologue, get through the first sketch. I want to see who introduces Timothy Chalamet and what the hell he's doing. So that'll be fun that night to do that. But the reason we are here tonight, so halfway through the year, we had 10 episodes in season 50 so far. We're looking forward to 2 this month. And we have on February 16th, we have SNL 50. So we're going to look back at those 10 episodes and each cast member and their stats, because that's why we're here after all. So John has prepared some slides. So if you want to come back on YouTube and watch, you can read along with us. But shall we go for it? Dennis, are you into stats? Are you into sports?
Yes, absolutely both. I'm ready to moneyball this show. Let's do it.
All right. So we have the Billy Bean interviewing with John Henry of the Red Sox right now. He's going to build a super team. So, John, you want to kick us off and maybe give your first take?
Sure, let's do it. All right, so we're going to do this the way that we've done the last couple seasons during the midseason or the end show, where we're going to go in order of power ranking. So the average power ranking from 17 all the way through 1. So, Mike, who is at the bottom of the power rankings 10 episodes into this season?
So season 50, we have 3 newbies, 3 rookies. You would expect to see one here, but we are not. We are seeing recently promoted to repertory player Devin Walker, ranking 17th with an average of 33 power ranking, taking into consideration all his stats of the season so far, which would include 20 appearances. That ranks 15th. I'm sure you can guess that Jost and Shea are the ones that are behind him. And total screen time, last place at 17 minutes, 15 seconds. Dennis, I say Devin Walker to you. What's the first thing you think of in the SNL career up to this point?
Promising in a kind of a journeyman way, maybe. I haven't really popped with him yet. I don't think he's really popped on the show. I like him. I think he's engaging. He's charismatic and funny. I'm not sure he's star material, but I was looking over the slideshow before the broadcast. I was really surprised that he was this low, especially the screen time. 17 minutes for the entire 10 episodes is pretty shocking. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, he's also one of 2 regular cast members to not appear in a cold open. So we did see him play the South Carolina Senator Tim Scott last year, which was definitely boosted his numbers getting into cold opens. But this year so far, we have not seen, other than Michael Che, because we actually have seen Colin, but Michael Longfellow and Devin Walker in No Cold Open. So that's definitely been a hit for him that I can see right off the bat. But John, looking at some of his A roll materials, we had 2 in the first episode, the Gene Smart Show, and not that many since.
Yeah, so on screen, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see that we put the A rolls up there, and those are the segments of the show every single episode where Mike defines that somebody is driving a sketch. So we only have 4 A rolls for Devin so far through 10 episodes of the show. Season 50, episode 1, he led as Michael Strahan the $100,000 pyramid. He also appeared on Update as Eric Adams, and everyone was feeling pretty good about Devin coming off a big season in 49 where he did a lot of his Tim Scott impression, and we felt like, okay, we finally found something here for Devin, and he's sort of finding his groove. Had a big role in the water park sketch, the Longfellow one, and then the Calling Dad in episode 6, but he has truly fallen off a cliff. I mean, I don't know where, like, I'm not even necessarily saying, hey, this is on Devin, but he has barely been a part of the show this season. You know, really not used very often. I still think, really, I know there's a lot of cast members, Dennis, but when somebody graduates from a feature player to a repertory player, the expectation is that if we're going to designate cast members in these 2 separate areas, that the repertory players are the ones that are supposed to be driving the show, and the feature players tend to get more bit roles. Well, this season, though I am very happy about how they've included the rookies, it seems to me that the new class that has joined the show are being used as repertory players, and people like Devin Walker and Michael Longfellow are being used as featured players. So it is really odd to me that they would do that and then move them up to this. You know, I know there's some contract stuff involved, Dennis, but it's very odd.
Agreed. You don't have to go back far. I mean, you think about Punky Johnson, I was surprised she got brought back. I was surprised she got bumped up, and then they did absolutely nothing with her. It's strange. I think it's just overpopulation. It's a brutal backstage environment. Fighting for airtime is, you've got 17 people all trying to score, and on a season that has been, overstuffed with, celebrity drop-ins and stuff like that. So I think, I don't know. It's not a good time to have a lack of confidence. Maybe that was his problem, or maybe it's just, I don't know. It's a bummer.
And John, I did calculate, as I've been doing all year, the projection for the end of the season, because part of the reason that we do the power ranking is because it kind of cuts through the fat of all these individual stats and gives you kind of one number to look at. But it is always interesting to see, well, where will they end up if trends continue? And so, especially comparing to last year's totals. So screen time pace for the end of the year for Devin would be 34.5 minutes. And just comparing to last season, where we had the bottom of the power rankings, all those cast members did not return. So that's something right away to think about. But screen time totals from last year, every cast member other than Molly had 37.5 minutes or more. Devin projected right now in season 50 to have 34.5. So that would have finished, he would have finished 16th out of 17 last year, and right now he's in last, but that only would have beat Molly's total at the end of the season. So that is definitely weird for a recently upgraded player. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah, and I have to put this out there also that, there is a chance that this is Kenan's last season on the show. Devin is the only other black man in the cast besides Kenan. What will happen? That's my big question. Like, is that is the SNL should definitely have a lot of diversity in their cast. If Kenan goes, is Devin taking, a lot of roles that Kenan had on the show? Are they properly, setting him up to be a big role for the future? I don't think so. So, there was, sort of this expectation when, Jay Farrow was a big part of the cast that, Jay and, Kenan, at least there was some solid footing with that area of the cast. Chris Redd also was developing, and he ends up leaving. So, Devin sort of comes in at that point once Chris leaves. And I'm just very unfortunately, I just don't think that Devin has reached those, heights yet. And I think it is something that this is a problem area in the show that either Devin has to become more involved by the end of the season, or perhaps they do look to make a change and add other black men to the cast moving forward. Because again, I just don't know what the deal is with Kenan beyond season 50, if this is a big goodbye to him.
Kenan being about to leave is always, he could say that every year, but I do agree with you. This could be it. Also could be it for Jostin Che. So Michael Che, Kenan, Devin Walker. If the stats suggest he's not coming back, that's 3 for 3 with the black male cast. So that would mean he probably would need to hire at least 2 new black men comedians to come into the show. So that would be something I think SNL would try to not do. But if Kenan obviously being an X factor. I think
I naturally didn't include Che in my discussion because, of course, he's not, a part of many sketches. So,
but just somebody that I would definitely put my finger on that's could be their last season above everybody else would be Jostin Che, in my opinion. But it's Dennis mentioned Punky. We saw Punky have some weird stats in there, get promoted anyway, and then kind of take off in her second to last season, I guess you want to say. So it's definitely room, and mentioning the election cycle over, maybe less cameos and more opportunity, but definitely would like to see Devin elsewhere in the show and maybe another update spot, even doing some stand-up like he did in this second episode ever. So let's move on to number 16. So we have Ashley Padilla. So she's our first rookie we're going to talk about tonight with a 35.4. So that's 2 whole points above Devin's total, or average, I should say, on power ranking. Appearances tied for 12th with 27. Total screen time, 21 minutes, 34 seconds. So only ahead of Devin. And the A roles we've seen her in, I think, have been decently memorable. We have the 10-1 with Bill Burr when she's telling the joke about, 4 gorgeous dogs. And we have the Italian restaurant with Paul Mescal, which was like a really good 2-hander on screen the whole time. So Dennis, over to you again. I'd like to just hear, I can't wait to hear all your thoughts on the rookies, particularly, but I want to let's talk about Ashley first.
I think she's in a solid position. Again, you guys are the Bill Jameses of SNL. You're just opening my eyes to a lot of, untapped potential and maybe overrated kind of stats. But I was shocked to see her this low, mainly because I think she has a solid slot as a character actress on the show. I think she's a very good actress, a sketch actress, in the sense that she can inhabit a character and make an impact and then get out. And she also has the look and the demeanor, if she wants to play a lot of straight person characters, kind of like set up the joke characters. I don't know. I think she's funny. I think I've made Kristen Wiig comparisons in my reviews in the past. Obviously, she's nowhere near that as far as notoriety or track record or anything like that. But I think she is poised to break out.
There's a Dismuke stat, I've been calling it for a while, is like how much of their own appearances occur during live sketches versus cold opens, monologues, pre-tapes, update, all that. So Dismuke is leading the Dismuke stat, so no surprise there. 73% of his appearances are in live sketch, but number 2, Ashley Padilla. So 2/3 of her 27 appearances have been in a live sketch. So that's not a surprise at all. So John, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I was the most excited for Ashley. She was the type of performer that SNL had hired for generations and then got away from due to COVID and them not being able to pull people from traditional sketch troupes. So when they got Ashley, who had experienced at the Groundlings, I was like, oh, this is fantastic because she can work with Mikey Day, she could work with Heidi Gardner and sort of build this next generation of performers that we're, used to seeing on the show. So I had the highest expectations for her out of all the rookies. And so far, things have been much slower than I thought they would be to start the season. Only a couple of sketches that she's really driven herself. And I thought that they would at least give her some more room on the show. If this wasn't season 50 and we didn't have as many cameos, perhaps we would have gotten those. I know that she was also recently involved with Mikey in the Nate Bargatze holiday special. So perhaps that there was some work done there that took her away from the show. But for me, I feel great about Ashley's future. It's just that it to me, this is Mike, this is like drafting like a rookie running back who has a really slow start to their career and they need to get adjusted. They come from college, they have all the pedigree, but they need to get adjusted to the NFL. And for me, I think that Ashley is just been slower to get adjusted to SNL. But the fact that they are putting her in 27 sketches so far and she's not near the bottom of that list shows me that there is confidence. They just need to give her some more roles where she is moving things throughout a sketch.
And let's just be fair. This stat profile we're seeing right now is exactly what you expect for a rookie. So that, not saying that in a positive way or a negative way. Honestly, all three rookies' stats are better than other recent rookies we've seen since we've been podcasting through 46 through 49. So they're all doing above average in that way. But looking at Ashley, she's one of 4 cast members to not be on update yet. And 20% of her screen time has been in 10-1. So we're looking at one of her A appearances that I got one joke sketch with Bill Burr that obviously was a lot of time right there. But if I were a rookie on SNL, I'd be happy to be getting 10-1 spots rather than nothing with the whole Aristotle Luke Noel profile where we getting shut out. Ashley's only had 1 shutout. So I think all of this makes sense, where the previous slide talking about Devin doesn't make a lot of sense when you look at his previous numbers. For Ashley, this totally checks out.
Yeah, and there's a good chance that in a few years from now, we're talking about Ashley running the entire show. And we're going to be laughing at the, season 50 early numbers where she was just very slow going.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see, I can pull them up maybe on the next slide and talk about when we get to those cast members, but like a Chloe Feynman or a Heidi Gardner, just someone when they come into the cast, it's like, this is somebody who could play any, pretty white woman. It's not going to take roles away from Heidi, Kate, Cecily, and the other women, and then they have to rise up. So I think Ashley, I'll do a comparison on them, because if we're talking about a cast overhaul, you're going to need somebody to do those roles that Heidi has been killing lately, because she's the most tenured woman in the cast. Let's go on to number 15. John, you want to intro this one?
Yeah, here we go. Jane Wickline. Nobody has anything to say about Jane Wickline.
No, it's been quiet all year.
Yeah, quiet on the Jane Wickline front. 35.7, so 15 out of 17 for the power ranking. 25 appearances, so that comes in 13 out of 17, or 13 out of 15 if we're going to remove Justin Shea from that. Over 22 minutes of screen time, that's good for 14th overall, and 3 A roles, so her in the water park sketch. The 2, and then the other 3 things that we get to see here are the 2 update songs, and then Grant and Alyssa. So really, she has been in a bunch of things this season, but has mostly made her mark on Weekend Update.
And Dennis, I don't know how into the TikTok you are. Maybe if you haven't been on, you got 6 more days to check it out. So coming in when you have somebody like this join the cast and you hear the term TikTok comedy, Are you excited? Are you cringing? I just would love to know your take on that.
I think it's fine. I'm always wary of seeming as old as I am, but they're some of the greatest, the people I have enjoyed most, on SNL and other places. I mean, Donald Glover was a YouTube comedian. The Lonely Island were, internet sketch comedians, and it's fine. It's progress. People are out there. It's got a certain democratizing kind of thing where you can get your work seen. So more power to them. I don't have any preconceived notions about that.
There's definitely always an evolution of that, like we saw with The Good Neighbor, from Beck and Kyle, and mentioning Lonely Island and having just some slants that maybe appeal to a corner of the internet that you can blow up on SNL and appeal to a wider audience. That's for sure. But looking so far, the A appearances, so we have 3 of those are from Update. So John, have you seen someone like this maybe since we started podcasting that's been an immediate Update star? Because I think those are sneaky the most competitive slots to get. So I mentioned getting a 10-1 slot, leading a sketch is great, but we're getting 1 or 2 Update spots in a week, and Jane's had 3 of them already.
Yeah, I would think Michael Longfellow would be a good comparison where, he started out really, really strong with a lot of good stuff on Weekend Update. And, there's a path here. I mean, Heidi Gardner is another one who really made her mark on Update before she did in sketches. So there is a path for Jane to find her way into the show through Update. It is just the most easily criticized place because you're out there direct to camera and all the focus is on you. So it's like, you got to have the intestinal fortitude to be able to pull off, going out there, especially with the uniqueness of the roles that she's done on Update, including those songs that are just so different than anything we've seen on the show before. I think for me, if you would have shown me this stat line in the beginning of the season and told me that one of the rookies was just going to have some good stats and not be at the complete bottom, but have a few big Update roles, I would tell you that's totally fine. Knowing what I've seen and heard and thought about Jane, I think that I would like to see when she does get more comfortable in live sketch work. Because in that water park A role, there was a lot of debate about, is this the right characterization for that character? Is she comfortable? Would a more seasoned performer have made sense playing off of Devin and Nate and Michael Longfellow? So I think these are all really, important questions that we need an answer for in these next 10 episodes. Is like, can Jane hack it in live sketches to the point where we all feel confident about her getting a second season? And that'll be something we'll have to wait and see.
And this will come as no surprise, the Wickline stat line following John's take right there. 10 sketch appearances. That's dead last in the cast other than Jostin Shea. So we had Devin last overall in the power rankings. He's at 11, so not much better, just one more live sketch. But Jane's appeared in 10 of the 50 live sketches this season. And her Weekend Update screen time is just about 10 minutes, just right behind Sarah Sherman and Bowen. So that's, like I mentioned, 20%.
So sorry, Mike, I just want to jump in there.
Yep,
you're saying that, she's been in 25 segments for the season. 10 of them have been live sketches, and the other 15 are either Update and pre-tapes or cold opens. Like what is the other?
Cold open, monologue, anything else. Just as far as the designated live sketches, there's been 50 of those this season, and she's been in 10. So she's been in no monologues, been in 2 cold opens, 3 Weekend Updates, 7 pre-tapes would be the other.
Dennis, I think she's just, she's one of the rawest performers I've seen come onto the show in a very long time, where it almost feels like, she needed some reps like outside the show before she got onto it. But, this will be one of those great stories of like, if we can give her enough leash, she may learn on the fly.
Yeah. I mean, for featured players, I think the path is pretty standard, an update piece where you basically get to do some of your pre-existing material or stuff like your pre-existing material, whether it's stand-up or in her case songs, is a good kind of, training wheels kind of, D-League kind of way to get people, get on the air, let people know who you are. But eventually you do have to work your way into live sketches because that's the name of the game. So it's a big leap, and not everybody makes it. And you have to have a certain amount of, like you said, like confidence and chutzpah to make that jump and assert yourself live. And we'll see.
I'll jump in by saying one thing I like, John. I'm saying Update stats right now. The number I wanted to pull was 45% of her screen time has been during Update. The next cast member on that list, other than the anchors, would be Sarah at 19%. So think about how great of a season Sarah's having, and less than a fifth of her time has been an Update, and she's one of the cast members who appear 3 times. So Jane, 3 of those accounts for 45% of her season, but she's not doing anything on Update at all like Bowen or Sarah. So for the diversity of comedy and the variety, like I'm happy about that anyway. So
me too. And let me just throw this out there as like a complete outside shot. But if Jostin Shea leave, is Jane considered as an update anchor?
I think it would be considered. I mean, we're talking about Longfellow for so long. We can do this kind of weird brother and sister pair of Longfellow, Wickline at the desk.
I think that would be one of the more fascinating decisions the show has ever made, and in like a good way, because like just somebody with a very unique voice that, you know, appeals to the new generation of the show, that will be given an opportunity to direct to camera tell jokes. I think it could be a really good fit.
That would be a tall Weekend Update pair right there. Let's leave it at that and move on to the next cast member. Michael Longfellow, fellow tall cast member with Jane Wickline. so somebody who, much like Melissa Punky Johnson, Michael Longfellow is probably the most mentioned person in the comment section when the SNN post screen time. It's, we need more Longfellow. Where's Longfellow? Help us, Mikey Longs, you know, all that stuff. So we have him here, 25 appearances. That's ranks 13th in the cast. Power ranking overall ranks him 14th. So because of screen time, he gets a lot of, you know, small roles to this day. And we haven't seen a great update appearance yet. So that's also not helping the stats. The A role so far, aforementioned water park sketch, which of course we've discussed a lot on this show, but his hand writing it, where it came from in his own material, and how it finally made air. So we have that off the bat. The Charades with Mom, which I thought was a great sketch. I talked about it a lot on the show too, with Ariana. What's that name? I mean, classic with Tim Kaine, right? That was that one. And then the janitor sketch was the Good Will Hunting one. So, John, I mean, what else can we say about our boy Mikey Longs? He's 14th. He's not last, but like Devin, upgraded, and we didn't see a good stat bump from the upgrade.
Yeah, this one's tough for me because I really root for him, and I think that he has a lot of potential, and I just know that he has a really funny, dry personality. He's just like almost one of those cast members that I wonder if he is in the wrong era of the show. Like I do wonder if he comes on in the early 90s and he's with all of those other stand-ups, like, you know, your Spade and Sandlers and you know, and Norms and all that stuff. I wonder if he just thrives on the show in another era. But in this era, you know, they're trying to sort of figure out how to place him into sketches. Seems to work really well when there's a host that is a stand-up, because they can sort of speak the same language, and his sketches that he would put together would make sense to the host. But otherwise, I still think in his third season, this is a guy who is still trying to find his place on the show. And I was really hoping that with this step up, that, you know, things would have come together a little bit sooner. So I would say, you know, it's great that he is better than what we've seen prior in this podcast, but still, I would love, you know, if he had found it already.
Right, on pace right now for 50 appearances, 44 minutes, 10 seconds. Last season finished with 46 appearances, 39-46. So he is doing better than last year. So we love to see that. But John, I mean, has anyone talked about more on the SNN about the Michael Longfellow ascension to update? It crosses the border into like every other podcast, into every comment section. So if it does happen, I don't want to take a victory lap. I just want, everything makes sense now. If it doesn't happen, what are we, you know, look how they massacred my boy. What are they doing here? Dennis, please, over to you.
Yeah, SNL always has room for a smartass who at least gives off the air that he's slightly better than this. And I think Longfellow, even though he's kind of, you know, he's on the lower rungs, he kind of came in with that amount of you know.
Mike, are you getting Dennis?
Joe,
I lost him.
Hey, Dennis, do we have you back now?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, perfect. If you want to just take that over, if you don't mind, just to get that cleanly. So you were just saying about Michael.
From the beginning.
Yeah, just let us know. Just overall, you said that you said that every cast sort of needs that smart ass, and he's sort of fell into that role.
A guy who gives off the air of I don't need this. And obviously he's a young performer. I'm sure he wants to succeed very, very badly, but it's a unique vibe that can serve somebody really well on SNL. And obviously, I think, as everybody's saying, apparently, I haven't been keeping up with the comments section, but apparently, everybody's saying he's the next update anchor, and I could see it 100%. I could see it. There's some Chevy in there. There's some Dennis Miller in there. There's some, I don't know what that sensibility means for update, but it'd be interesting to see. I can't see a more seamless kind of transition for another person in the cast. And yeah, like SNL loves a game show, and I think when he has had the few chances he's had to host a game show sketch, perfect fit. Especially if you can bring a little meanness or mischievousness to if the premise is kind of a mean one, like what's that name or something like that. He can sort of preside over it like the devil, and that's a good look for him.
And John, if that decision is made, we have to go back and look at the appearance stats, screen time stats, all that for pre-promotion to update who were a cast member. We have people like Jost or Che who came right in and filled that role. It's happened a lot in SNL history, but when you have your Seth Meyers and your Norms, people who have been in the cast and then been promoted, just because that reduction in screen time would be more seamless, right? Because you're going from, oh, he's not a huge sketch person. That was the Cecily storyline. Was you're really going to take Cecily Strong out of more sketches to put her on update, and then they changed course in that. So again, thinking that if that doesn't happen, I don't know what we've been doing here. But final thoughts.
Yeah, I just don't know that the show knows what they want to do with Michael, and like that sucks for him. Because
regardless of all that.
I think like you can't help but feel a little lost in that right now you're not the weekend update anchor. You're in this cast, and there's a lot of things you would love to get on the show, and for whatever reason, like he's not given those opportunities all the time. And like Dennis said, I mean, he hosts What's That Name and fits into that Bill Hader box, and he's so perfect for it. I also think that there's a lot of sketches where he has a little bit of a youthful energy to him, but I do think that there's like a lot of dad roles or straight man roles in sketches that could be filled by Michael, but they're not. And I think that is, a position where if he's going to survive on the show past this season and not get update, I think as he ages and gets more comfortable in the system, I think that's something that is a path for him where when other people write a family dinner sketch or people sitting around a living room, there is an authority figure that I think he could bring to some of those sketches that he's not currently being placed in those roles. And that may help down the road.
This is a crazy poll, John. Season 49, average screen time per appearance, 52 seconds. Season 50, average screen time per appearance, 53 seconds. So
nothing has changed.
Yeah. The exact same amount of Michael Longfellow when you see him. And of course, not being on update so far this season has kept that number staying sub 1 minute. But let's move on and talk about another rookie. So Emil, this is somebody who came in that I didn't know what to expect, where they would put him in the cast. He's kind of been everywhere. So we've seen him do a couple A-roles. That would be, of course, him as himself on Update, doing stand-up. Snakeskin, that was a good standout in the Bill Burr being the son in that sketch. Banger Boys podcast, which he had a lot of great lines and played off his mukes, I thought, really well. And then the earring sketch, we see him not play the son. That was Paul Mescal, but he was the dad in that sketch and got to really work with Heidi a lot. 42.5 power ranking makes him 13th in the cast. 33 appearances so far out of 10 shows for rookie is fantastic. That's 6th in the cast. And then 24.41 in screen time, which ranks 13th in the cast. Again, very solid for rookie, but no surprise there. Dennis, this is now our third and final rookie of the night to discuss. Coming in the season, if you had to predict who's going to have the most screen time or rise to the top, would it have been Emil, Ashley, or Jane?
I thought Ashley probably just because she just seemed like natural sketch performer. But I like this guy. Again, I go with the kind of uh, acting chops. I think he's very good. He's a very good screen presence. He can adopt a character and hold the screen. He seems very confident up there, and yeah, I'm interested to see where he's going. I don't know if I have. He's a little slippery for me. I don't know if I have a complete handle on what it is he wants to accomplish on the show and what role he eventually is going to have. But I'm a fan.
And John, if I had told you at preseason that one of the rookies, maybe it's Emil, maybe it's Shane, maybe it's Ashley, but they would have more appearances at the halfway point than Chloe Feynman, Ego Odom, Marcello, Mikey Day, and Kenan, like, you would have thought I was insane.
I would said, "What are you smoking?" Because I literally would never have imagined this for Emil Wakim, and I'm so impressed with him and the amount that they're putting him in the show. I mean, this is everything you could dream about as an SNL fan. To have a rookie come in who defies all of our expectations, and the show is actually inserting him into roles that he could be a major part of. I mean, he seems like way more of a natural fit as a stand-up than some others that have been added to the show in recent years. And I just think he just like seems to really get the game of the show. He seems to be bonding really well. Another factor that we don't see on screen here, but is obviously an added element, is like, how well do you fit with the group? Is there chemistry? And like, if you go on social media and you see people posting pictures with Emil and in the cast and the writers and stuff like that, it seems like everybody really loves this guy. He's super likable, and that people want to put him in their sketches, and that's why he's been getting all these roles. So for me, it's like, if I was coaching him, I'd feel like, okay, we got something really good cooking here. So I am very curious. He has some, we have some A roles that are listed here for him. His stand-up on Update, that's something he comes in with and sort of, develops, and that's where his background is. Snakeskin is, I wouldn't call it his sketch. Banger Boys, I also wouldn't necessarily call it his sketch, but the earring sketch, that one for me was the one this season that I feel like is really, his voice, his sketch, what he could do, him and Heidi working off each other, like being the mom and the dad in the sketch, like that to me was like really, really fascinating for a role for Emil. So I honestly believe we're looking at somebody who could be on the show for a very long time right now. And I think this was a big win for the show to find him.
Totally agreed. And we once in a while on this program, we'll say danger watch for a rookie. I think unless Emil Wakim wants to leave SNL and has just such a good opportunity that he can't pass up, the stats would lead me to believe that he's a lock for 51, which is, I almost would never say at the halfway point of a season for any rookie, because it's just such a volatile thing. We've seen it in the past, in good and bad. And I do track first sketch of the night appearance. That's like after the monologue when we have the first set, and he's appeared in 4 of those. So 40% of the time, Emil gets a shot early in the night. That's tied for 3rd in the cast with Mikey, Jadge, Dismukes, Marcello, and Sarah. So in good company there. And we've just seen him get that primetime spot. I mentioned this for Michael Longfellow, so since we are singing the praises of Emil, it is relevant that he does have the lowest screen time per appearance. So he's got 33 of those, but averaging 45 seconds. So we have seen little dashes of Emil and small roles, as well as these A roles we talked about already. So Dennis, any final thoughts on Emil?
No, I think I covered it. I just want to say, Mike, as an SNL fan for my entire life, I'm always very grateful and shocked that there are new ways to appreciate and understand the show. And your stats are just, they consistently blow my mind. So well done.
Appreciate it. Game meets game from Dennis Perkins. So I will definitely take it. John, next slide, please. So Chloe Feynman. So here we are, 12th out of 17, the power ranking, averaging a 55. Definitely surprising for Chloe, who I think has consistently risen. Comes in with Bowen Yang. I mean, talk about a banger class right there. Season 45. I mean, if you want to include Shane Gillis, who's also become a huge star, but never appeared on the show, so I can't. So Bowen and Chloe coming in season 45. Now they are definitely veterans. Chloe Fineman did have a shutout this year, so that does affect the numbers. But here they are, 32 appearances. That's 7th in the cast, so pretty good. Gets voice work, gets supporting work. Kind of can put Chloe anywhere. We saw her be utility like crazy last year. This year, not a lot of A roles that you would think, but did star in the most viral sketch of the season as the bride of Andrew Dismuke's Matt and the secret lover of Domingo, of course. So that's 2 right there. Jennifer Coolidge doing some impression work with Ariana and Dana Carvey. The Wicked auditions and the It Girl Thanksgiving. So maybe some swing and a miss there. Same episode, Charlie XCX. John, I think you discussed that these sketches enough, but Chloe Fineman, here we are, 32 minutes, 9 seconds of screen time. That goes 12.
Yeah, I feel like I like Chloe more than most people, but I do feel like she is best suited on the show when she is not driving a sketch. She's a very solid impressionist, and I think she's also a really solid B or C player. And that's why I felt like in the parking lot altercation that we got in the Marty episode as Mikey's daughter in that sketch, I thought that she was absolutely fantastic. I think she's really good in the Domingo sketches. And obviously as Jennifer Coolidge, I think that was really fun. So, this season, I think we've seen some good stuff from Chloe. And we've also seen stuff from Chloe where I don't think that she's the best at on SNL. Like if she wants to use her own social platform for these things, or there's other areas like other media, TV shows, films that she's meant for, I think that she could do some of the things that we ended up seeing in season 50, episode 7, the Charlie XCX episode, which didn't fully click for me, where she drove a couple sketches, and I think she sort of drove them off the tracks.
Got a question in the chat from Victor. What episode was she shut out on? That was the Bill Burr episode. So we saw no Chloe that week, and then she did bounce back in the Charlie week. Looking at her projections, so projected right now for 64 appearances. I'm assuming she won't be shut out again, though, so that number will go up probably to 68, 69. But last season, we saw her everywhere. She was 82 appearances by the end of the year. So, Dennis, so do you think of Chloe Fineman, somebody who I think you could easily say a rising star, probably has a great follower count on social media, has been in ads, is now all in on Broadway. So you're seeing her, the Met Gala, you're seeing her a lot of places that aren't Studio 8H. But let's talk about season 50 right now. Chloe Fineman, are you kind of in or out? Is this kind of the peak has already happened for you?
Again, I'll just say blowing my mind with the stats. I wouldn't have, because she's so, I think what John was saying, she's so, you're so used to seeing her because she'll pop up in, a B or a C role. It might be a pretty thankless role, but I always have a sense that I see more of her, I guess, than I do. Yeah, I guess I'd go with John as well. Just the idea, I like her. I think she's a solid sketch performer. She doesn't thrill me as a star would have to. Somebody who's gonna. I always think about somebody who you just can feel that they're gonna have that show. The one where they're really gonna pop. That it could happen anytime. Where it could be a sketch. A single sketch. It could be just a strong night overall, where you think, oh, this is a star on SNL. And yeah, I think maybe her time on that is past. I think when she came in, she was, I think she got the gig because she was an impressionist and she did some very timely impressions at the time. And I think it's good that she kind of broke out of that, because we've seen, look at poor Melissa Villaseñor, who came in as an impressionist and then disappeared. The show just had literally nothing for her week after week after week, to the point where it just became, it felt like, I don't know, punishment or something. And whereas Chloe, maybe it's because she has a more conventional look. Maybe it's just that she has she can play it straight in those kind of B and C roles. But yeah, I think she's a solid presence. I could see her stay. I could see her go. I don't know. I like her.
My historical comparison, Dennis, has always been that I feel like Chloe is a lot like Abby Elliott. She's just
Okay.
used more than Abby was at the
Mhm.
time, who had Kristen Wiig sort of dominating the women roles on the show.
Mhm.
But I think that one of the reasons why Abby, though she was only on for 4 seasons, is pretty well remembered and well regarded among the fans is that I think that she just found her place at the show, doing a lot of really great impressions and then helping a lot of sketches along. And I just, for me, I just don't know that the sketches that Chloe has driven have taken off in the way that maybe the show had hoped that they would.
And John, this is one that I haven't pulled out yet tonight, so I will. Talking about season 45, newbie. Now we're going on season 6 for her. So this is Chloe Fineman, average screen time per season, going from 45 to now. 156 as a rookie, 223 in the COVID season, 218, so a 5-second drop off to 47. Then 5 minutes, 3 seconds, just crushes expectations. Is upgraded, full cast number. That's 5 minutes, 3 seconds in her second year as a featured repertory player. Season 49, 413. Cast, stays the same size, but we have some new blood in there. And then this season, 313. So she's dropped off a minute. So we talk about peaks. Season 48, over 5 minutes a night. Down almost a minute the next season. In season 49, down a whole minute this season in 50. So definitely interesting, bell curve for the Chloe Fineman screen time stat. But let's keep it rolling, John. It's Michael Che. He's at 11. So this is John, one time we get to do like a compilation. I recently started screenshotting every time someone says, why does Michael Che get more screen time than Colin?
Have you really?
Yeah, so I have like a collection of maybe like 18 of them through the years. I even look back to my old Reddit days when I started doing this, and it was the same questions then as it was now. Colin Jost and Michael Che had the same job. Why are the screen times different? Just because they are. I don't know. Let's put it at that. But his screen time is 39.52. That ranks 8th in the cast for somebody who has a built-in A role every week. So he's 10 for 10. Update anchor. Hasn't missed a show since he started. Even the Paul Rudd show, he still anchored update. So those 10 appearances would be there. Power ranking ranks him 11th. John, I'll go over to you. If you want to talk about update as a whole, you can throw Kojo in there as well.
Yeah, I mean, always happy to have Joseph and Che, and like if people are tired of them, thank God at least we got that joke swap at the end of the first half of the season, because that was just some magical stuff that they put together at the holidays. But yeah, I don't know, like there's not a lot to say here. I mean, it is incredible that he's on a 212 straight episode streak with no shutouts or absences. So he's always been there since he came onto the show in season 40. And, I do sort of, this is one where with the Kenan thing, we've been talking about this for many years. I think I'm ready to put down that this is it for Che, my opinion. And I think when all is said and done, he will go down as one of the greatest update anchors ever.
Yeah, I've loved this storyline. We talked about it recently on By the Numbers, just how much, I think it was the Chris Rock show, the trajectory of Jost and Che to being basically I would say they might be the face of SNL. We've been talking about that a lot stat-wise, and talking about Bowen Yang, Kenan, how he's risen and fallen, Mikey, Heidi, but it's really Jost and Che. You're seeing Jost. I mean, they've hosted an award show together. Now we're seeing Colin Jost on Pop Culture Jeopardy, having a glimpse into maybe a future career for him outside the show and how long he's been there. But let's face it, I mean, Michael Che, 13th oldest cast member of all time, 12th oldest cast member of all time, Colin Jost. So they're at age 41 and 42 respectively. So Dennis, if the Jost and Che era ends in 50 and I don't get to talk to you again this season, I would love maybe your headline as a headline writer. Jost and Che, hanging up after season 50. What's the story there for you? What's the lead?
Holy cow. It's time. I they're very good at what they've chosen to do, and
It's the
what the
90s,
show.
man.
Yeah, it's very good at what they've chosen to do and what role the show has decided Update should have on the show. I'm a little tired of it. I think Shay is a very good stand-up. I think the reason he gets less time is that Jost is more of an MC type. He's more of a kind of recessive personality, whereas Shay is much more effective as a kind of a sniper. And their dynamic, I mean, it started off real rough. They were not comfortable in the chairs. They were not comfortable together. It didn't seem, and they've honed it to where the dynamic between them is like the third character on every update. And the joke swaps are just such an enormous hit because it just, it mines that comic tension, as imaginary as it is, as constructed as it is for more bracing, unpredictable laughs than we generally get from update from them. So I don't know. I'd be happy to see some new blood in there.
Yeah, I mean, turning the page, as we've mentioned, John, like they broke the record. I think it was October of 2021. Now we're in 2025, and they're still anchoring update. So they've nothing left to prove, of course. So all the accolades for Jost and Shay. Not to mention, we have talked a lot about how we would probably miss that kind of like edgier voice, and update's a great platform for it. So I would hate to see update with newer blood be a little like neutered and safe, because there's so much sketch concepts that you can have the whole spectrum of G-rated to R-rated, where update is so quick that when you have someone like Michael Che delivering the jokes, he can kind of spin it anywhere he wants. But let's move on. We're in the top 10 now, power ranking. Kenan Thompson. All right, John, I'll let you take this one.
Yeah, this is a stunning stat line for him. I mean, it was going down last season after he had some really amazing seasons in 47 or 48, but to be 10th in the power rankings halfway through the season, just a complete shock. If you bought Kenan stock coming in, you were just you gotta sell your assets, because for me this is rough. 60.4, 10 out of 17, only 27 appearances, so tied for 12, 37 minutes and 44 seconds of screen time, also tied here for 10th. But there's always, I've sort of described this season, Mike, as I'm watching it, that like Kenan to me is at this point, he's sitting in his office. If somebody wants to come get him, they'll get him, and he'll run a sketch. But otherwise, he's sort of just sitting there waiting for somebody to pull him into something, because I don't think I don't think he's writing anything. I don't think he's being like pushing to get himself into things. I think everything is sort of like he's in the passenger seat at this point.
Sorry.
Yes. We can look back at Tom Brady's career and say he had 3 Hall of Fame careers. First Patriots dynasty, 3 for 3. He had the 2 Giants losses and had his MVP year, undefeated season. Then later went 3 more Super Bowls with the Pats, won 2 of those. Won 3 out of 4, and then went with the Bucs. So that's a third one right there, or maybe 3 or 4. Kenan comes in super young cast member with Finesse Mitchell right after we had Fred and Will, and he goes through and survives that whole era post that like Rachel Maya era, which was catching steam, into like the next golden era of the Sudeikis, Hader, Wig, and then he lives through the entire Kate, 80, Pete, Cecily era into this. So Kenan's easily had 3 Hall of Fame careers, and his usage has reflected that. So when me and John started doing this, Kenan was on a slight rise after a huge season 44. Looking at season 47, this is just power ranking average. 86.8, following a 78.1 in 46. I didn't mention that one. 106 next season in 48. 81 and 49. 55 and 50. So this is the biggest precipitous drop off of anyone in the cast, bar none. Even Longfellow, we saw stats increase. So Dennis, I mean, it's so hard to put Kenan in a box, no matter what, and stats included. But the drop off is too big to ignore, so we have to discuss it.
Yeah, man. He's royalty. I mean, he just is. I mean, if there was ever anybody who was born to be on SNL, it might be Kenan. And again, stats blew my mind because he's a bit, you just think SNL now, you think Kenan, you think he's always there. And because he is always there, he's always you always know he's going to get his in a show, even if it's one line, even if it's a cameo with a funny voice and a weird wig or something. He's just always welcome, and he always brightens up the experience. But yeah, I mean, I've always said that Kenan could be on the show as long as there is a show, and I'd be perfectly fine. But he doesn't seem all that motivated to drive a show anymore. I mean, that really was never his thing in the first place. I guess he was more of a kind of an ensemble guy. But his charisma just stole scenes. You just watch him. If he's easing himself out for season 50, I mean, nice round number for the longest tenured cast member. That seems right. I'll be sorry to see him go.
Yeah, I mean, me too. I'll be sorry to see him go because I still think he's a top 10 cast member of all time. It's just, if you watch any sport and you see an all-time great, tail off towards the end of their career, and sometimes you're watching it and you're like, oh, I'm so grateful I got to watch this person, play for as long as they did. But it's also a little sad. And it's just that, like, I know that I've seen Kenan, whether it's, him, doing What Up With That and running all around the studio, sweating and doing his thing and just completely blowing our minds. Or even after Jason and Will and Fred left, like, he takes all the utility roles and he's the, Reese DeWatt opening up sketches and in pretty much in everything. Everyone wants Kenan in their sketches throughout the night. I mean, he has had so many great moments throughout his entire career. It is just weird to watch him on the show now and be like, oh yeah, Kenan's still there. And I never thought we would get to that point. I thought it would be that he would sort of, go out on top. But now, 10th in the power rankings, this is, it's hard to watch sometimes, Mike.
Yeah, he ended up finishing 5th last year, which that was the headline on By the Numbers basically all year, was how Mikey and Heidi and Bowen had supplanted Kenan as the top of the class, not including update. And now at 10th is just crazy. And he owes so much stats to just the Bill Burr episode, 11 minutes 17 in that one night. Other than that, hasn't had a single 5-minute episode, which is banana land that Kenan has not. I mean, he averages in his career since season 44, like last 140 episodes they have. I can scroll over to Kenan stats, and the likelihood of him having a sub 5-minute episode is just rare. So he averages 5 minutes 48 seconds an episode. That goes back to season 42. This season, only one episode over 5 minutes, and it was huge. It was the Bill Burr night. So you're seeing him play like Family Feud, Steve Harvey, Little Richard, The Calling Dad, where he plays a dad, the Being Willie, Che's neighbor, old guy, the sexual harassment Charlie character, like old guy. Like, we're not getting fresh Kenan takes. They're making him play an old man as the old man of the cast, which is, I agree, John, a little sad to see Kenan go out like this if this is it.
Yeah, and just again, like for those like listening along or just trying to follow what I'm saying, there are literally 10 other cast members that have appeared in more sketches this season than Kenan Thompson, a guy who is for most people consider potentially a top 10 cast member of all time. When they call on him, when they need him. Episode 6 was a rough episode for a lot of people post-election, and it felt like an episode, all right, let's bring in the big guns. Let's bring in Kenan, who could sort of settle everything down and be a big part of the episode. Totally makes sense. That's why Lauren loves having Kenan around, because, whenever he's called upon, he will be there. He's just not there anywhere near as much as he used to be.
Last deep Kenan stat had a poll. Just you see a lot of averages. They take out the outlier. So I mentioned 11-17 screen time with Bill Burr. I think Johnny raised a good point. Maybe we needed some kind of familiarity. Let's brighten the spirits post election, and put Kenan out there. Let's just smile tonight, because it's tough to smile at a time like this. So we had a lot of Kenan that night. But if I drop that from his stats, he would average this season 256. So talk about 5-minute episodes. We're not even getting 3s. That would put him 14th average screen time for Kenan Thompson.
Yeah,
in a cast of 17. But let's move on. We're on to number 9. Mikey Day, another surprise here. Won the power rankings last year. Did have a shutout this year. Hurts his numbers. Worked on the Bargatze special. Has been doing a lot behind the scenes, but John, we count as a shutout because he could have appeared in that episode, and he's been in the building every week. So I'll let you read these ones off too.
Yeah, I mean, I drafted him 3rd overall in our preseason draft because I had high hopes for Mikey in this 50th season, who really had a resurgence in his career post his castmates in Melissa and Alex leaving. But this has not been his season. Certainly behind the scenes writing, he's been very involved, but on camera, not as much. A power ranking of 60.6, so 9 out of 17, 29 appearances. That's good for 10 out of 17. And 37 minutes and 16 seconds of screen time. That's 11 out of 17. And as far as A roles are concerned, so the sketches that he is driven on camera, we had that golf tournament sketch from the Nate Bargatze episode, the Shop TV cookies. That was a recurring piece that he brought back where he led that one with Heidi, the horror choreography sketch where he's dancing around, Italian restaurants that he did, Grandpa's Magic Car and Chris Rock, and then the parking lot altercation, also a recurring sketch in season 50, episode 10. And, it's sort of a similar thing with Kenan where, I think Mikey Day, probably a top 40 cast member of all time, had a lot of really big years and moments on the show, brought his own brand to the show that I feel like was a really important part of this era. And I've been really impressed with him and what he did after some of his people who he worked on the show with the most left. But it has been a drop off now. And, we talked about the Bargatze holiday special. That could have been a factor here. But does this continue for the second half of the season? Does he finish at 9? This is a very surprising place for me, Dennis, to see Mikey Day in these rankings.
Yeah, I think he's really so entrenched in the writers' room now that his roles are, I don't know, not secondary, but it just seems like he's got his fingers in a lot of pies. So maybe he isn't as motivated to be the driving force of a sketch. He doesn't really have much to prove anymore as far as a performer goes. And there have been accusations lobbed that I don't like Mikey Day, and that's not true. I do. I think as a writer, he tends to give himself very thankless roles in sketches that he's written that he feels or that people feel need explanation that it really doesn't need. And so he ends up over explaining premises a lot. And I think that stuck out to me along the way so egregiously that I kind of roll my eyes a little bit. But I don't know. He's just one of those really solid presences that he's never really thrilled me, but he's always so adept at what he does that I don't know. I don't know what else I have to say about Mikey D.
Fair enough. I mean, I was just looking at his counterparts of people that have been on SNL for 9 or more seasons. He's the 17th person to do it. So talking about 167 credited cast members of SNL, 17 of them have been for 9 seasons, and 4 of them are in the cast right now. Mikey, Che, Jost, and Kenan, of course, who is in his 22nd year in the show. So I kind of, surprise, Mike is doing a second Boston sports analogy, but you kind of inspired me, both of you, about his usage in the writer's room, maybe, because that's where he started out. and then he had a big rookie year. I'm not gonna lie, stat wise, but he had even killed it as somebody who you're like, oh yeah, I kind of forgot that Mikey's like really good at this show, stat wise, a couple of years ago and last year, is kind of like Brad Stevens of the Celtics. He was the head coach of the Celtics and built this core with them with Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and others. And then they call him upstairs, and they hire a new coach, and they went to the finals and they lost, and they hired another coach after some stuff happened with him. Ime Udoka, Joe Mazzulla, so that Mikey Day is kind of like, hey, we want you here because we know that you've contributed to this core and we want you to see it through. So I think the Mikey Day reduction stat wise is intentional. Maybe the Kenan has his feet up on the desk and they go, hey, Kenan, get in here. And he's like, yep, be right there. But I think Mikey Day is taking a conscious step back to give roles to an Emil, Wakim, or a Devin, or a Michael Longfellow, or any of the other male cast members that are younger than him that could be like, hey, this could be a Mikey role. But yeah, but let's make it an Emil role. So that's my Mikey take. John?
Yeah, I just think behind the scenes, like his role in the show is like he will be missed if he's gone. I think that him and Streeter are an amazing, one of the best cast member writing alliances ever. And I think that, Streeter's importance to the writer room is really, still important. So to go back to your Brad Stevens analogy, maybe he reduces himself on screen and perhaps gets more involved behind the scenes and more of a production side of things. I don't know. But it is just, the numbers are telling that he is way less involved this year than he was a couple years back. And he really, really peaked in 48. So, I do still enjoy getting to see him on the show. And I don't think he's, ran out of gas. But I also, wonder if this is deliberate at this point.
On pace for 58 appearances in season 50. Last season finished with 85. Tie with Kenan, only behind Heidi. So
yes, and we also have to keep in mind that no longer playing Biden on the show. That role could have gone to him, taken away, given to Dana.
Very good insight, John. I think that he could be a Brian Tucker like writing supervisor. Like that would be a perfect role. I mean, he has a Netflix show. Is it cake? So is it the rest of his career? I'm not sure about that, but I would imagine that SNL is near and dear to him, and he would be willing to stick around even if he says, I'm not really down to play with the kids anymore. I'll be in the front office. I'll Brad Stevens. So let's go to number 8, John. Marcello Hernandez, easily breakout star of the promotions. We mentioned Devin, we mentioned Michael Longfellow, who were in the bottom 4 of the cast. Marcello's at 8th, 62.4. 30 appearances. That's 9th in the cast. I think people would imagine, though, that it's higher, but he's also total screen time 39.45. That's 9th in the cast. Of course, gotta talk about Domingo. Talk about Sabado as well. 2 days of the week right there. Dennis, Marcello Hernandez. If you think back on all your days of covering SNL, does he profile as somebody who's poised to take over the show, or is he kind of a flashy side distraction during something else going on? Because I imagine that Marcello will have success no matter what, but SNL is kind of a vehicle. I don't see him doing that, but I really want to know your take.
I think this will be, I think he'll probably be back next year. The leap from this year to next year, I think will show, because I think we are due for a cast changeover, and they are going to look to, you need anchors from the previous cast when you have a largely new cast. And as far as whether he can take that leap, maybe. He's one of those performers who he's so engaging and he's so charismatic and he has so much energy that I respond to it maybe disproportionately to the sketches that he's in. I don't know. I like him. He's young. He's I struggle to think who I'd compare him to. I'm still struggling now. I don't know. From a past cast member standpoint, is he somebody you build a show around? I don't think so, but I could be wrong, and I'd love to be wrong. I don't know.
Well, John, I want to go right to you. I think you're somebody who's great at doing those comps when called upon. So if you got one, then let it rip. But this is somebody I think that NBC, that Lauren, that the show is like we are investing in this in this player. So that's for sure. I think the Domingo stuff happened organically. It wasn't, some backstage like psyop to get SNL trending on TikTok, but that's the nature of Marcello. So I would give him all the credit in the world for that, and I don't think it's by accident.
Yeah, I think historically, like by comparison, I think he has the energy of a Martin Short or Sherry O'Terry, but obviously, has the the Cuban and Dominican flavor to him that they don't. And then I think you blend that with sort of the Jimmy Fallon, Pete Davidson, it boy type of thing where people are just obsessed with him. That I think that creates a really electric combination of there's going to be some sketches where he's going to go absolutely crazy and run around on screen and do things because I've seen it, like I said this on the show before, I've seen him in person. He's like the Tasmanian devil in real life, like running around talking to everybody at all times, and he has that type of electric personality that this show was made for. He's an absolute star. But what's interesting is that he's so popular and so well liked that he almost doesn't have to have that role, and that if you put him in the Domingo slot, which is the guy who comes in at the end of the sketch to sort of fill that circle, he's still as well regarded. So even though Domingo is not on this list because he didn't drive that sketch, he's like I would say 90% of the people who watch SNL, which is not us, we're the vocal minority, but the majority of people who watch the show will know him as Domingo more than they would Marcello Hernandez at this point. And that's because of his, dynamic personality and all of that, and just being so beloved, and obviously coming in with a huge fan base as well. So for me, an absolute star. And I will say, just truly from this midseason by the numbers point, I am very surprised that he's not in the top 5 or top 6. I think this is somebody that they're trying to build the show around. And for me, it is, I think that right now is when you want to keep putting stock on Marcello, because I would expect his numbers to rise even more in the second half of the season.
Totally agree. This is somebody that I'm surprised John is at 8th overall. It's just the screen time is low. So we've had a couple of these A-roll sketches that he's had tons of screen time. Of course, Sabado Gigante being 2 big ones right there. But I'm looking at the breakdown of every appearance by every cast member and what the designation is. And let's just cross off Jost and Shay, who, of course, are 10 for 10 leading update. That's a given. It's Bowen Yang at 15. It's Dismukes at 14. It's Heidi at 10. So we have some vets. I'll throw Dismukes in there as well as a vet. And then it's Jadge, Marcello, and Sarah having 7 of these so far. So that means that Marcello Hernandez, first-year rep player, who's way beyond Longfellow and Devin, has 70% of the shows on average has a sketch around him. And that's not even counting Domingo, where he's the coda, the add-on, the button of the sketch. So things for Marcello stat-wise are great, even though he's 8th. But as we move on this list, we're going to realize, oh, okay, these are people who just put up numbers after numbers. So not surprised there.
Yeah.
Let's go on to James Austin Johnson.
Yeah, JJ here. Love the picture that James has here for him.
It's giving Phil Hartman.
Yeah, it's very Phil Hartman-esque, and I love it. And I think a lot of the montage was, odes to previous eras. So I love that we had that in there. But yeah, 65.3 power ranking here for Jadge, who comes in 7th overall, tied for 4th in appearances with 37, 40 minutes and 22 seconds of screen time. kept the Trump role. That is something that could have gone elsewhere, and he was able to keep it. So that is huge. Trump wins the election, is going to be the next president. And because of that, I think James will have a lot of opportunity to play him on the show. I think that this is, I said that on one of the podcasts in the last few weeks, Dennis, that I believe this is a crucial point in James's SNL career where whatever he does with the Trump impression for this second administration will be, what James may be remembered for, because he could do stuff here with the right writing that will make people love coming to the show to see his impression, rather than what we ended up getting down the road with Alec, which was people dreading seeing the impression on the screen here. So I think there's a lot of potential. And I also love that we have some A-roles that are listed on screen here that are not just the Trump stuff. These also got opportunities to do some other great impressions and characters on the show this season too. So Dennis, what are your thoughts on James so far this season?
Off the top of my head, first, just want to say that I might be the biggest. I was I was on the Judge train right from the beginning, and I made those Phil Hartman comparisons just in my head before I dared put them on paper. Pretty early on in the sense of just character actor extraordinaire, ability to don and doff the sketch character mask. To an eerie degree. Plus, he's great at playing old-timey guys like Phil was. As far as his Trump goes, I think his Trump was better pre-SNL when he was freed up from having to worry about what the studio and Lauren and network and the Sunday talk shows had to say about it. I think it's gotten less interesting, but I don't think that's his fault. I think his conception of the character is unique and very funny and very potentially very potent. I think SNL works against him on that because it's SNL. It doesn't want to really piss anybody off, especially looking forward to a second Trump administration where he's been openly threatening to comedians and naming Saturday Night Live by name who make fun of him. It's going to be real interesting to watch SNL try. SNL's vision of its own kind of mythology as a rebellious TV kind of guerrilla force is going to be really tested like never before, and James is going to be right at the center of it, and
as it should.
And in some ways I feel worried for him, not in the sense of getting blowback, but in the sense of more just him being a more unique comic performer, especially in that role, than I think he's going to be allowed to be. So again, I'm interested. I mean, and I'm, as with the real world, I'm here, I'm in it. I'm going to have to go through it. So I'm gonna buckle down and kind of really examine how SNL uses him in this role going forward.
Mike, I just want to say, I think that I love everything that Dennis said. To me, this is the moment right here on January 13th. James has been handed the ball, put the tape under the eyes, get ready to go into the game, because you have a complete blank slate right now. Anything could happen. It's not done yet. We're not done. We're not 4 years into this thing where everyone knows, like, anything could happen right now. This is the moment in time where James could take over. So we shall see if he does.
Right. And he's about to play the incumbent president. We saw a little bit of Biden, but there wasn't a lot of meat on the bone for that. And, for better or worse, for his career in SNL early, of course, we saw him first sketch of his career, cold open, being the incumbent president. And it was very impressive. He had a huge night, one of the best debuts in SNL history. But if I want to look at him in a macro sense, I feel safety in James Austin Johnson being on my team at SNL. If I think of it as a roster, the talent level by nature is raised in the sketches that he's in. So if we want to look at his stats, I can say them for you right now. 14 minutes and 3 seconds of his 40 minutes has been as Trump. So of course you're going to say this is a guy who's getting a big boost by Trump being relevant, and of course he's now more relevant than he's been during James's career at SNL because he's about to become the impressionist of the current president in 7 days. So that's 35% of a season. But there's a behind the scenes detail that does giveth and taketh away, which is this is a guy who's sitting in the makeup chair and getting prosthetics every week. So for Alec to do it, he could show up early in the day and he could just be wearing the Trump makeup 2 hours before dress, where James is rehearsing other sketches and he's got to get in that chair, get ready, do a cold open, and then has to take it all off. So for a regular cast member, that is hindering to his stats. He's been in 8 of the 10.
I don't want to hear that shit. I'm sorry. I don't. I respect you and I love you, but
Yeah,
I don't want to hear that because Dana Carvey did it, Phil Hartman did it. You know, this has happened in many eras before where people have played the president and then absolutely dominated the rest of the show. I know they had less cast members around them
and less makeup and less prosthetics. I mean, let's talk about seeing James with and without that makeup on. It's nothing compared to Phil Hartman being Clinton with a wig on.
I get it for sure. It's a factor, and I'm glad you brought it up. But I don't want any excuses. Like there is, even if he can't be in the first sketch after the monologue because he played Trump in the cold open, a guy as talented as James should be put in the rest of the show.
Well, that was my next point, John. So I want to see this man flex his muscles outside that, because we saw him finally get the Bob Dylan in a Mulaney promo and then finally get to do the Bob Dylan on the show proper in the 10-1, which I love to see as a huge Bob Dylan guy. And I love seeing James's tweets about Bob Dylan. So outside that, we've seen his little bit of his Adam Driver, a little bit of his Louis C.K. and those type of impressions. There isn't a designated impressionist other than Chloe and him. So I want to see that elsewhere. We can do impressions outside of politics very easily on the show. It's been done for 49 years now, almost 50. So James is somebody that I just think that the talent level is immense. And he's somebody that America is going to get to know if they haven't already. He's said live from New York 4 times this season. Of course, it's more than anyone else, and is somebody who you can plug and play everywhere. So if we know how to talk about outside Trump, he did the Gallagher brothers from Oasis, which I loved, with Sarah, and did that Hotel Detectives sketch that they had to plug in after Stevie Nicks technical difficulty that night with Ariana. So, and we got to see a little Judge Mukes with the Snakeskin, compilation album right there in the Bill Burr show. So musicality, impressions, outside Trump, there's plenty there, John. So I think it's going to be a huge second half.
Big night incoming with post inauguration and Timothy Chalamet coming in, who just did Bob Dylan. James has the great Bob Dylan impression. So,
and by the way, if people, as I said, I saw the movie a couple weeks ago, A Complete Unknown. James Austin Johnson appears in that movie. It's, albeit for one scene. I didn't have my stopwatch going in the theater, but it's probably a minute and a half that he's in the movie, but pretty great that he was in a Oscar nominated to be film, Bob Dylan or not. It's cool to see James outside SNL in a big way, and even in a tiny role. So I am the most excited about anyone in this cast, Trump being the next president or not, is JAJ for sure. Let's go to number 6. All right. We have my friend Ego, somebody that I was banging the drum on for so long that wasn't getting the time she deserved, and has unfortunately kind of leveled out, but the tenure has helped, I think, for sure. Still is being a big 10-1 player, which I think is interesting because I think she kind of took that from Kenan a little bit. and I'm not complaining about that, but looking at 10-1 appearances in season 50, it's Heidi, Ego, and Dismukes. 6 out of 10 of the episodes has been in the last sketch of the night, and has always killed it in live sketch. So here are the stats. 68.6 power ranking ranks Ego 6th. 31 appearances ranks her 8th. 48 minutes 29 seconds ranks her 6th. So kind of across the board is like the 6th star of the show right now, and 5th if we delete Jost from the standings. A rolls, John. Anyone you want to talk about?
I think the Uber game show and the blind date were really big roles that seem to stick with people this season. That's from episode 4 and episode 9. But yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about Ego. I don't know if she's reached her peak or not, but it'll be really interesting to see what happens to her in the second half of the season. With Alex English and Gary Richardson leaving the writing room and Carl Tart coming in that she has chemistry with from Comedy Bang Bang, I'm really curious as Carl gets more comfortable behind the scenes, does that mean we get some really good stuff from Ego in the second half of the season? And I think it does. So to me, again, would not be surprised if she is in the top 5 of the rankings. She's right outside of that right now. I'm feeling pretty good about Ego. And for me, if there's going to be a lot of, departures after the season, she's somebody I have absolutely no problem if she sticks around. I still think she's really, really solid on the show and brings a lot. So I'm pretty happy with her. Another solid season from Ego.
This is somebody that I would urge SNL to beg to stay if she's 100%. Considering leaving, because there are some vets above her that, for a lot of reasons, we could say it's time to move on, or maybe it's been done so far. But Ego is just miss consistency, because on pace for an hour 36 of screen time. Last season was an hour 29 of screen time. So the consistency is there in the screen time numbers, but the appearances are a little down because we're seeing Ego lead sketches more and not be a supporter as much. So I love to see that, and just love to see Heidi and her just kind of dominate as women of the show who have been in the shadows for a lot of their first 3 years. So Dennis, when you see Ego, I love the Shane Gillis sketch that she did last year right after the monologue. That was such a great showcase for her. So in general, seeing Ego this year as really like a leading lady, which I think we can officially say that that's the case now.
Oh yeah. And going back to something John said, I've been the people who don't know, the podcast Comedy Bang Bang has been around forever, and it's a showcase for some of the best improvisers and character people in comedy. And I was just listening to, they just put out the year in review kind of countdown to the best episodes. She's all over it. If you go back and listen, I was listening to the previous year. She's all over it. And so is Carl Tart. And you brought up Carl Tart is in the writer's room. They work amazingly well together, and they both have that kind of really live wire ability to do improv and to do character sketch work. I'm very excited to have them be a potential writing and maybe performing team. We saw Carl once in that courtroom sketch, and he popped because he's Carl. He's a funny dude, and she could use an ally, because I don't think the show has ever really tapped into what she can do, except in very rare instances. She's always struck me as somebody who's got more to show than the show will let her show. I said show way too many times. So I'm always hoping that she gets more to do than she does. And now she's got somebody on her wavelength. Maybe that'll help.
And John, I'm looking at her best episodes of her career. 2 of them occurred this season. Michael Keaton, you mentioned that game show and the Uber sketch, that was a big help. And Chris Rock, she had a great night with him. And I'm seeing a trend too. I know that SNL hosts lean male in general, but works super well with male hosts overall. So I'm looking at, she had a huge night, best of her career with Megan Thee Stallion. But after that, it's like Jake Gyllenhaal, Owen Wilson, Stephen Marty, Reggae Jean Page, Keaton. Last time we saw Chalamet, Josh Brolin, Chalamet the first time, the Elordi show, Nick Jonas. Like, there's a lot of male hosts. So do you have any take on that? Because Ego is somebody, I mentioned the Shane Gillis one too, that you might see on paper, oh, host X is coming in, and then Ego will kill it with some of these like leading male hosts.
I just think she's a great scene partner. So it
Right.
makes sense that they would want to work with her. Not that women who are hosting wouldn't see Ego as a scene partner, but oftentimes on SNL, they do pair men and women together. And I think that, everybody wants to work with Ego. So, she doesn't always, in those cases, she's not always the one that's driving the sketch. So because of that, her numbers, don't get as inflated as they could. But I don't know. It's interesting because I still think she's one of the best update performers that we've had in the modern era. And I don't think she gets the credit that she deserves for, just her hit rate on update is so high. Like every time she's on there, everyone's like, oh, that was good. Like, I don't remember anyone ever being like, I hated what Ego did on update. Like that just never happens. So she crushes it there. She's also really solid in sketches. Like to me, she's, if I'm building a cast out of this cast, she's definitely one of those first few people I'm taking.
I agree. That's why I mentioned that this is something they should urge to stay to build the new era. I think we can talk about the history of Black women on SNL and how they literally needed to find one mid-season, like basically an SNL casting call before Sashir came in mid-season. And, it's definitely a different performer than Leslie and is a different performer than Maya Rudolph. Talking about other recent Black women who have been on the show. But Ego, as I think, if you want to comp, outside race and outside usage on update, because it's a, more narrow lens, is just very much a Kenan Thompson player that I think facial acting can be physical, not really known for impressions, but can pop up anywhere. So I think what Ego is doing right now has been spectacular, and I have no complaints when she has a big night.
Yeah, I will say my only thing about Ego, if I was coaching her, is that like I've heard her talk, especially when it came to Lisa from Temecula. She talked about why she doesn't like doing recurring characters because then she always feels like, there's not. I don't want to misquote her, but it was something to the effect of that she feels like it always pales in comparison to the first one, and there's no creativity there. And I think that is, it's just so ingrained in the fabric of the show to be able to connect the audience with a character and have them build some continuity and character development, that I do think it would really help her, especially for some of the update characters that she does, to build a character on update that can come back multiple times instead of just being, random Amazon employee or random woman who can't find something in her purse. Maybe that person has a name and a backstory that we get to see in other situations down the road. And I think that's a small pivot I would make if I was her.
I think that's a great take. We don't get to know Ego on stage as much because of that reason, that it's a lot of one and dones, which, for her highlight reel is great and definitely different than Kenan's, where he's had a lot of those characters who come back and back and back. But yeah, I think right outside the top 5, seeing Ego there makes sense to me, and we should expect a lot from her in the second half. But John, let's take away top 5 now.
Yeah, my favorite cast member, Andrew Dismukes. I mean, I love getting to hear his voice on the show. I think his voice is really needed. It's definitely weird from a numbers perspective. He's 5th in power ranking, 76.1, 37 appearances, tied for 4, and total screen time, 51.48. So that's also 5th. And you would just expect from the stat line, and he has a ton of A-rolls this season, that he is all over the show. But I do feel like they scaled back a little bit with him from 49 to 50, where the second half of the season last year, he was on an insane run of every episode. He was getting something in that was really written in his voice. And besides Hey Soul Sister and the Brilliant Lawyer sketch, I do feel like we haven't had a lot of Dismukes centric pieces this season that have fully like taken off. And when you have the success of Jumanji, the engagement sketch, the cookie sketch from last season, with Gyllenhaal, like I think those are the ones that have really, really permeated. So I'm curious in this sort of post-election new year if there's more room for him to play on the show. But I, of course, really love him and love getting to see what he does on the show.
Fully agree. And, Dennis, get ready to bring the heat for Dismukes in a moment. But 14 A roles. So looking at his whole breakdown, 14 starring role as in, A player, 18 B roles, 4 C and 1 D. It's like, basically like a voiceover, something like that. But his percentage of having 38% of the time Dismukes is in SNL, that he's the leader, either being the baking sketch host or being the, Hey Soul Sister or the brilliant lawyer, which is like much in his voice. That's as good as it gets, really. I mean, he's only behind Bowen by 1. So if you think about leading cast members, it's really Dismukes and Bowen at the moment for the guys. So, I mean, Dennis, we've now had the privilege of covering every episode that Dismukes has been in the cast. And he's now 5th in the rankings of the cast. Last year, he was 10th. He just broken into the top 10. Now he's threatening to be top 3. So are you happy about that? Or is that kind of surprising to see someone of his voice be more, appealable to the wider, not the SNL stands, but the casuals too, are seeing more Dismukes and his voice and getting onto the show like consistently?
I think he's got a sneaky advantage in that he can play a lot of everyman. Like if you need a guy, he can play a guy, and he's so boyish that he can play young. He can, but it's when he gets his own showcases and you're like, oh, this is a Dismuke sketch that he's just he's one of my favorites too. SNL needs a guy who's kind of set up his own shop as far as the weird guy, the guy who is allowed, because I'm sure there's a lot more weird, excellent ideas that come up in the writer's room than we get to see, but you need somebody who, for whatever reason, is allowed to set up his own shop, whether it's a 10-to-1 sketch or whether it's the first sketch after the monologue, and you're like, that could be a 10-to-1 sketch. Those are my favorite sketches, where it's just like, it's so unique and it's so funny that they have no choice but to give it prominent placement in the show. And it's a lot of the time it's because it's in his voice. And I mean, he talks about how his heroes growing up, on SNL were it was like a Will Forte or somebody like that who, he's gonna you're gonna watch a sketch and be like, well, obviously that nobody else could have been the one who wrote that. And again, he's sneaky because he's so innocent looking, that it's a good stealth delivery weirdness mechanism that he's got.
I think that's a good take. I feel like Andrew Dismukes would maybe like to be called someone who sneaks up on you comedically. And John, I'm disappointed right now. We're doing this show and he's 5th only because he finally had a bad stat week with the Martin Short episode. So we can discuss why that is. There wasn't enough room to have a Dismukes piece that night because he had, a 17.9 power ranking in his last week. If he had put up average that week, we'd be talking about him at the end of the night at number 2 behind Bowen. So he'd be the second best player, but finally after 10 episodes had a down week. And now he's at 5 because it was such a low, huge drop off from the whole year, where he had the best 4-episode run of his entire career was Bill Burr, Charlie XCX, Paul Mescal, Chris Rock. It was the best Dismukes run we've ever seen. Then he had a drop off. So we're here at 5.
Yeah. I'm not surprised because I think in an all-star episode, which I always really enjoy getting once in a while, but in an all-star episode, you're never going to have the guy who sneaks up on you have a good episode. So like, I would never have expected a Will Forte to have a good night in the Betty White episode because it's just not, I know that show is all about the women, but just as an example, because that's just not where they thrive. They thrive on regular nights of the show where just, you have no expectations about what you're going to see. And then all of a sudden, Nate Dismuke's sketch pops up and it's hilarious. So for me, that was sort of to be expected. I don't really think that Christmas episodes are going to be his forte, quote unquote. I think that he's going to do well in the in the down moments of the rest of the year.
Right, and a great adjective that I like to use with this Mukes is evergreen. Like that kind of, this sketch could have been in the 70s. It's a concept, or a lot of it is referential to some pop culture. He comes at an update the first time and talks about the 90s, or late 90s decom Brink, and like a lot of his voice, he came in very young into the cast, very young as a writer even before that. But a lot of his sketch concepts could have been done in different eras with different cast members, a la a Will Forte. So of course, yeah, the very special SNLs are not going to maybe favor him, and only 38 seconds of screen time with Martin Short definitely dropped him down. But Dismuke stock is definitely at an all-time high, and I will be very proud at the end of the year to have him, win the bronze medal of the power rankings, because he's doing it the hard way. He's doing it really without a lot of update, without any political impressions. He's not doing it playing himself like a Pete Davidson or a Leslie, on Update or elsewhere, and getting to pop in, kind of make fun of himself. He's doing it in an original way, almost exclusively. He's doing it in live sketch, in character-driven pieces, and in concept-driven pieces, again and again and again, which I think SNL has not done a ton of, because more pre-tapes, more pop culture, more politics, which is they've always done. But Dismukes is definitely getting the stats the hard way. So I think that's kind of cool. On to number 4. John, take it away.
So Heidi Gardner in at number 4, somebody who was in the top 2 last year, right, Mike? Heidi came in at 2nd overall.
Yes, like a by a hair finish with Mikey Day, came in 2nd. Would have been the first woman since Kate to win the season stat-wise.
Yes, but did have the most appearances of the entire cast last season, and truly, had a breakout year. And she's having like a really, really solid follow-up to that incredible season 49. I think it's been a little bit slower with all of the storylines. I think she's been a little bit lost in the mix because of all the, people coming back and the election and all that stuff, and her lack of involvement in those roles. So I would expect an uptick in her involvement in the second half of the season, but still like a pretty solid one. I know that she was lower in the power rankings, I think, for a couple episodes. And then, as we got towards the end of 2024, she found her way up there. But as far as A roles are concerned, the Mile High Burger challenge that she had in episode 2 was a big one for her. Tableside Guac in episode 4. She did a couple of update pieces. The earring sketch that we talked about with Emil was another one. And then, of course, an act of kindness that she had, and sort of drove that sketch in the Marty Short episode. So I feeling pretty good about Heidi going into the rest of the season. And I wouldn't be surprised if she was on the show for more than just the second half of the season, for a few more years, because I still think she is a really, really solid and reliable performer.
Agreed. Only has had 2 kind of down weeks. That was the Gene Smart premiere and the Ariana Grande 3rd episode. Other than that, has posted over a 50 and currently has the best episode of the cast stat-wise, which was the Paul Mescal episode. So logged at 165. Like, that's a number that could be like a lower tier host. And that's just Heidi being a supporter in that show. And then, some two pretty consistent weeks in the 70s with Chris Rock and Martin Short. So, Dennis, we have a lot of hours out there on Heidi on this podcast on the SNN and talking about if she could be Mount Rushmore of female cast, which is a really tall order with, the Jan Hooks and Kates and Kristen Wiggs and Gilda. And there's a lot of names you can do that. But talk about sneaky. Heidi is somebody who's like shows up to work on time, hits her marks every time, which is kind of why the Beavis and Butthead break became a story, because it's somebody you don't expect it from. So I'd love to just hear your takes on Heidi overall, because I don't get to talk to you very often. And then season 50 has been, she's having a great year. So that's kind of covered.
Echoing what you guys have said, she has become reliable and professional, and that's great, because she is so good, and she's one of those people you're just like, oh, this is a sketch performer. This is a really good actress. I mean, I haven't watched Shrinking yet, but she's getting great notices there for character work, and she's proving that she's a really good actress, but being a really good actress and being a really good sketch actress are really two very different things, and they don't often cross over, and she's proven that she can do both. If I have it's not really a knock, and it's not really a criticism. I guess it's more about my expectations based on how she broke in. I just remember, the big Weekend Update piece that broke her was the boxer's girlfriend from every movie, and it was just such a vibrant characterization, and I was like, oh, this is somebody who could really steal the show, and become one of those names that you mentioned. And I don't know that she's quite done that. I think she's kind of throttled back or something, or the show has throttled her back, or she's found a groove. She plays a lot of straight roles, and a lot of sort of roles that could have been anybody, and she's really good at them. But I still relish those times where she's allowed to pop more and show that kind of vibrancy again. I'd like to see more of that. And if that means, that she doesn't have quite as many A roles, or her ubiquity is kind of scaled back in favor of getting to do some sketches, maybe, and I'm sort of speculating here, but some pieces that she could feel more strongly about and throw herself into more, I'd be okay with that too.
I think you raise a good point, and we're probably going to mention this when we talk about Sarah Sherman. I've done a lot of segments on her stats this season that I've been tracking similarly, but with Heidi, it's a double-edged sword a little bit. I've mentioned ad nauseum about her waiting to break through with those three women that were the stars of the show. And now Heidi's, I think, just being asked to do a lot of heavy lifting just as a sketch leader. And a stat that I think is very appropriate for that is leading in first sketch. So that's a stat I mentioned earlier, but 6 out of 10 times she's appeared in that first sketch. Most screen time, 14 minutes, 42 seconds of her season has been in that first sketch, which has traditionally been a Mikey Day or a Kenan. And now it's been Heidi. So I think when you are the underdog and you get to pick and choose, I feel so strongly about this, like you were saying, Dennis, about I want to get this character on. I'll try it over and over and over, where I don't think Heidi needs that as much anymore to get to break through, because she could kind of show up late and be like, hey, Heidi, you're gonna be leading the sketch as the news anchor for the the daytime news, and she's like, okay, I got it. Where before it might have been like, I need to lobby for myself to not to beat Kate this week, where now it's very easy for Heidi to just very regularly log good screen time. So that's kind of the double-edged sword that maybe women face a little bit more than the men, is having like you mentioned, the boxer's girlfriend. But when we're talking about what she has done this season, we are seeing more of those similar wacky mom, which she excels at. But I would agree that let's talk about, John, that Michael Jordan Last Dance pre-tape. When that hit, it was like, if you don't know who Heidi Gardner is, like, you should now. And we have seen her on podcasts and commercials outside of SNL. So I think things like that definitely make her name out there to the layperson. But in the show, maybe it's hard for her to do that when she's doing so much work on the show.
Yeah, I mean, I think when there were other performers around, she was able to get like one thing on a night that really popped. But in the absence of the other really strong women that came before her, she's now pushed to the forefront and asked to do a lot more. And the question is like, what does she want to be doing on the show? Does she want to be doing those dramatic update roles that we saw at the beginning of her career? Or is now that she has the opportunity and the leash to do so, does she want to be playing, the star of a sketch, the kooky role, or the mom in a sketch, or any of those things that you would typically get from some of the greats? And I think she does, and I think she's happy and having fun on the show. I love her stats. I think that she had, like I said, a couple breakout moments last year with the Beavis and Butthead, which obviously wasn't planned in the way that it developed. And then also that secretary sketch that she performed a couple times, most notably with Kristen Wiig, that I think that her going toe to toe with Kristen was a moment for me where I was like, okay, hand on the table. I think she's made it. I still think the only thing that I could say about Heidi that I wish that she would do is I just wish she would let us get to know her as a person on the show more, because I think like whether it's her coming out, and I've said this take before, so you may have heard this, but I said like I think that she needs to, if a host is there talking to the audience, I think Heidi can come out, oh Heidi, like, and then she says something direct to the audience and we get to know her as a personality, because I just think she's such a brilliant actor that we don't always get to know her as much. And all of the people in the power rankings around her, let's say save for James, who can do those characters and impressions, we really feel like we know their personalities more. And I just think the general audience is still trying to get to know Heidi.
And John, funny enough, they did kind of hit on that a little bit. There's a pre-tape from a while ago of Chloe Feynman doing an impression of all the women, and when she goes over to Heidi and then she does her Heidi impression, the joke is that there's no impression to do because maybe doing a Kate McKinnon and doing the body language and the voice, people knew who Kate was, even though she is so private outside the show. There's like a note to hit, or you can put your finger on like how do I do a Kate impression, where Heidi, it was like, go Chiefs, she's like wearing a Chiefs jersey
Right.
and just like, I'm Heidi Gardner, like that was it. So I mean, we could probably talk about a lot of SNL greats who were of that mold, and there's nothing wrong with it. But I totally agree, only because Heidi's personality is so great. She's not somebody who's like that person who is very shy and very vanilla. Like, she's so much fun, has a lot of great opinions on SNL and sports. We've seen that. So I would definitely love to see that more. And like you said, like doing a question and answer monologue, and also seeing her pop up in that Marty Short monologue was great with the vets. It was like, Ego and her, and actually Sarah as well, but with Kenan. So seeing Heidi do all that this season, I think the show expects a lot of her, and she delivers consistently. So I can't say enough about that.
Yeah, it's just, where does Heidi fit into the meta of the show is the big question. Like, when you get that monologue and then Marty says like, and Kenan, like, when is the point where somebody says and Heidi about something? And I'm waiting for that, and it's like almost there.
And final thought as well, she did win the appearance stat last year with 88 appearances. No one in the current cast in 50 is projected to get there. Bowen Yang is number one, and he's projected for 84 appearances. So no one is even, is threatening Heidi's total last year. So we're going to look at top three now. John, let's talk about Sarah Sherman. This is my storyline of the season, that Sarah Sherman is a top 3 SNL cast member. And if you want to eliminate Jost from that, she's number 2 behind Bowen. So, spoiler alert right there. But Sarah Sherman, I've been talking about all year that her stats have just like completely blown up.
Yeah, definitely biggest development and storyline is that we have completely 100% given up the Sarah Squirm personality, and Sarah has completely blended into Saturday Night Live and has become one of the leading performers on the show. And I know a lot of people like love Sarah, love her work outside the show, and are not necessarily happy about that. But purely from an SNL perspective, I'm grateful that we get to see her as much as we have on the show, giving us a 79.7 power ranking, third overall, 37 appearances, also tied for a 4. So in that top 4 there. Total screen time, 56 minutes and 23 seconds. But just like has been all over the show. You know, she did the Matt Gaetz impression, but for the most part hasn't really been part of the election season. And she's been the one alongside Bowen, who we'll talk about, has been really carrying the show this season. So this is, if somebody has missed the first half of season 50 and they're like, what has been going on this season? Catch me up. One of the biggest, headlines that we have here is that Sarah Sherman has really made a mark on the season and on the show itself.
2 big milestones we talked about, Dennis, this season was Sarah has hit 4 hours of screen time. She's hit 200 appearances. So we are no longer in the what will Sarah do era. We're expecting it on a regular basis, which is definitely great for her name recognition. But there's just been a lot of storylines, and I think John hit it right on the head. Is now Sarah Sherman is definitely an SNL cast member. It's not somebody who's like from the outside, like, oh shit, what's gonna happen? Sarah's on the stage. It's she's anchoring a cold open as Nancy Grace. Like, that's something that we've seen from other people do before, and she's able to rise to that occasion. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on her.
Who would have thought it? I mean, I wasn't familiar with Sarah Squirm or Sarah Sherman before she was cast, but I caught up real quick. And I was, like a lot of people, I was like, how, kudos to the show for bringing on somebody whose entire shtick is making people really uncomfortable, grossing people out, and pushing people's buttons. And yeah, who would have thought? And on the show, she had, you had the occasional, the meatball people and the googly eyes and stuff like that. But yeah, she's really become just a voracious performer, which is great. I like her. I don't think she ever really disappears into a role. She's not really an actress in that sense, like a Heidi Gardner or a James Austin Johnson or somebody like that who's gonna bring you character work. She's always kind of, to an extent, herself and playing to the camera. And SNL certainly has room for people like that. I mean, we've been talking about Martin Short a lot. I mean, Martin Short never met a camera he couldn't stare down the barrel of. And if there's anything of the old Sarah Squirm persona that she maintained, it's the beating up on Jost. That kind of idea of her as the kind of leering kind of antagonist who can poke holes in the supposed kind of rich, privileged white boy persona, that she maintains a bit of her kind of outsider cred by doing that, but it's become kind of shtick more than anything else at this point. I like her. I'm glad she's on the show. I think she's reliably really funny and entertaining. It's just not where I thought she was going to end up. I thought she'd be more, if she survived an entire season, I thought maybe she'd be like a Kyle Mooney, somebody like that, who lived in 10 to 1 or just did her own little films, and the show kind of put them out there to see if anybody would bite. But hey, more power to her.
Yeah, I mean, Dennis, I would like to push you a little further,
Sure.
like pick your brain a little bit more, just because thinking about Sarah and doing pre-taped segments, like she's only had 5 this season, which is basically tied for last with Kenan out of the 18 pre-tapes. So we're not getting the Chucky or the meatballs, So we're like we mentioned, we're getting her front to camera, cold opens, being utility, being female cast member X in the sketch. So I would ask you, is that where the proverbial rubber meets the road with Sarah? Is there a third gear that we should be expecting, or is somebody who's like oh, she's a good SNL cast member. You know, she could be a Kate McKinnon, but like, I kind of want your comedy analysis brain to be the Sarah coach. You know, me and John talk about that a lot. You're the manager. What do you say to do? Dial that more?
Holy cow. Being completely unqualified for the job, I would say it's funny. I'm staring into her eyes in the slide that's up and just thinking like her just staring at me, just like, you idiot. Just like I don't know that she needs that gear. I don't know if she's really interested in that gear, you know, finding a I think she's this is going to sound like a criticism again, and it's absolutely not. I think she's very much about herself. I think her persona is so strong, and her approach to Saturday Night Live, as much as she has taken it over, is so strong that she's always playing herself to an extent. And I think she's much more comfortable in that. I don't know between the the Sarah Squirm stuff, where she's clearly channeling a whole bunch of stuff that is never going to be on Saturday Night Live, and being kind of like the kind of beaming, kind of leering, look at me kind of comedy machine that she's become. I don't know if there's a middle ground that she has. I don't know if and if she has one, I don't know if that's really something she's shown much interest in playing on the show.
Right. Yeah, I
don't
get
know.
you.
She's kind of a mystery to me.
John, I'll go over to you to wrap up on Sarah. I would say, you know, I raise my hand on the Sarah sweepstakes and say that the Dan Bula partnership, I think, hasn't even been tapped into enough. So we've seen the midnight matinees pop up, and we've had a little bit of Sarah in the Beppo one, and you know, Sarah as the severed head in the fridge of the my best friend's house. But we know that those two can make magic, and I would hope that the second half of season 50 would be the time to showcase that. We have no idea how long Dan will be on the staff and Sarah will be in the cast, so do it now. That's my final thought, John.
Yeah, I think what's interesting for me here is there's a little bit of a storyline developing where Sarah has overtaken Heidi slightly in the power rankings. And, you know, Sarah to me is having a lot of roles that could go to Heidi, where Heidi in a traditional sense would be playing some of those, you know, generic SNL roles, and Sarah would be the more personality driven performer that you would see. But instead, Sarah is getting a lot more generic roles, but she has a baked-in personality where she came into Saturday Night Live with this outside persona and alter ego and all of this. And so because of that, like, I just wonder if we are currently working, like there's some chemistry test that we're working on right now where we're brewing this potion of like, can we take Sarah Squirm and squeeze her into Saturday Night Live so we get Sarah Sherman with just a dose of Squirm every now and then. And if we can do that, she is bar none guaranteed to be a top 3 power ranking, you know, performer and also a star of the show. So it's still a work in progress. I'm very fascinated with all this.
This has definitely been, as I mentioned, my favorite storyline. You know, I love to see Dismukes have that jump, but I think we could see it coming. Just with his stature in the writer's room and have that tenure. But Sarah Sherman, average screen time, rookie year, 2 minutes, 2 seconds. Second year, 3:40. Third year, 4:15. Now fifth year, season 50, 5:38. So she's jumped about a minute every year, which we talked about those drop-offs. Like imagine in 51, if she's averaging 6 minutes, like that would be, you know, the best Kenan years, the best Cecily years, the best Kate years. To have an average of 5:38 is huge. So I don't want to undersell that. But slide number 2 in the power rankings is Colin Jost, of course. And this is somebody who, by just sheer length of update, just has 6 minutes and 2 seconds of average screen time. So he's somebody that almost, I don't want to say frustrates me, but is the only person in all my years of stat coverage who kind of overrides the whole system. because the screen time is just so consistent. It's just hard to beat him. I mean, John, you prepared those on our social media, and it's like Colin Jost is in his face is in that top 3 or top 5 because update is there's no risk of update being cut this week. So Colin Jost is going to log 6 minutes. So Dennis, I know we talked about Che and Jost
Sure.
and the whole trajectory, but have you seen basically any Colin Jost difference than other years? Do you feel like it's a closing book and just we'll go quick on Colin?
No, I think Jost is Jost, and he's I don't know. I've kind of said it all about update. I think this version of update is played out. I think it
right.
And that's largely because it's formed around Jost's personality, which is kind of an above it all kind of smirky cleverness that trumps, so to speak, the substance on a regular basis. And he's a funny guy. I like him a lot more than I did when he first started. I know his book is called A Very Punchable Face, and it's nice that he's self-aware. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else to say about Jost.
Yeah, no problem at all. I definitely feel like Colin has been a little bit more meta, John. We've seen him in the digital short, and we saw him, wearing the, January 6th get up and stuff. Like, we've seen other instances of Jost outside there, which I would love to see some Che do that if he's going to leave too. I was watching the rerun when they did the the Wiz live show, and seeing like Che be the scarecrow of the Wiz was funny, just because you'd never see him in just a normal utility live sketch role. But I would say there's, as much as we know Colin Jost and we make fun of Scarlett Johansson's husband and stuff, is maybe like offering a little bit more opinion-based things, like the fact that he was at Harvard like when Facebook was invented with Zuckerberg, and seeing Zuckerberg in the news now, like that's something that I would like to see more from Colin. But we'll wrap it up, John, with you and go on to Bowen.
Yeah, sure. I just want to say love Colin, absolute Hall of Famer, and I think he's having a great season. Particularly the fact you mentioned the SNL for Trump and Here I Go, but also like him being in the 5-timers club for just a second with Scarlett Johansson, pushing the door in his face. Like, I love that he can continue to make fun of himself, and those are the things we ask for on the show from our update anchors. Is just like have fun with the show, and I still think one of the greatest writers to ever be on Saturday Night Live. So let's talk about number one here, Bowen Yang, who has dominated the show this season. 94.7 power ranking, 42 appearances, number one in the cast, over an hour screen time, an hour and 6 minutes, and the A-rolls are just endless. Just every episode of the show continues to crush. And this is something that we've been talking about for season after season, of like, when will Bowen be the person who is running the show? And he is that person right now who is just absolutely crushing it.
And if you look at the list of A-rolls, John, there's only one show where he didn't have like a showcase piece. That was the Chris Rock episode. That's episode 9. So he's had at least one. Like, look at the first episode. Moo Deng was probably the first SNL story of the year on Update, with the chaperone commentary, and seeing, of course, him being, along with James Austin Johnson, the only active cast member to play one of the political candidates as JD Vance. We didn't get a lot of that, but we're going to probably see some of it in some form, and maybe there's a new take. But a lot of VPs in SNL history, there's not a lot to say, and not for better or worse. It's just because the VP is basically not a lot of responsibility to be the VP, other than be the VP. So if we see more of Bowen as JD Vance, I'm for it. If there's a take, if we don't see it ever again, I won't complain either. But I think his synergy with like A-listers is the story. I mean, seeing him play with Ariana Grande, and him starring in Wicked, and that being referenced in show, not just outside the show, has been a storyline. He's still consistently on Update, and working with Ego, like in the airport parade, that came back, and seeing him bring in someone like Trisha Paytas and doing the Spotify Wrapped sketch, just things of that nature, is very much of the moment. Bowen Yang, SNL, you know him, you love him, and somebody who came in and you look back at his numbers as a rookie and a sophomore were very unimpressive stat wise. So to see him be number one, it almost seems like a foregone conclusion as SNL analysts and fans, but definitely had an interesting road to get there. So Dennis, final cast member of the night, Bowen Yang.
If other than if somebody was born to be on SNL, it's Kenan. If somebody else, it might be Bowen. He's just a performer. And I think what you said about him being so plugged into pop culture and to kind of younger and more kind of off the network's radar personalities, people that Lauren would love to get more involved in the show, having Bowen there as kind of the conduit to that is really important to his brand too. Yeah. Plus he's just a funny dude. I don't know why he felt, I don't know. I don't know if his career plan was to corner the Weekend Update, either inanimate object or animal market, for really funny appearances. But he's really great at it. And the way they all kind of are commenting on celebrity is kind of it's got more teeth to it than you would think of just a guy in a bug costume or a drone costume or a hippo costume or whatever it is. He's just a funny guy. I think the thing that's unfortunate for Bowen this coming week is that he's going to be put front and center again when Chappelle's hosting. It's like it sucked that that he got hired the same time as Shane Gillis too, where all of a sudden, he's, through no intention or fault of his own, is going to be the point person for a lot of commentary and controversy and a lot of really shitty people saying terrible things. And I think that sucks for him, but at this point, he's a big ass star and he can handle it. It's just a bummer that he's got to.
Yeah, I've been honest about his comedic sensibility doesn't always match with mine. So because of that, I don't always see him as as cast into the star of the show role as well as others who have been in previous eras. But I am like really, really impressed with him and what he's doing on the show, given how much talk there's been about like, does he really want to be on the show? Does it make, is this where he, sees his career? Does he see his career being on the show in the long term? I find all that talk was like really fascinating over the last few years. And then for him to come in the biggest year in the show's history with the most eyeballs and people talking about it and stuff, and just to have him there running the show right now in the way that he is, it's really, really impressive. So, you saw it before the season started in the Emmys when him and Seth and Maya and Kristen, like they're all up there and he's a part of that group. Whenever they've had these all-star episodes in the last couple of years, whether it's, Kate McKinnon bringing back people in season 49 or Marty, he's been all over, with those big name hosts. And I just feel like SNL wants to put him out front and center. And clearly he is doing his part to make himself the face of Saturday Night Live right now. So whether you love him or not, you can't help but just be impressed and marvel at what he's done this season. And I'm very, very fascinated to see if he's going to keep this up for the rest of the season. Because, outside of the show, he is a super nice guy. And I wish him all the success in the world.
Definitely, as the reigning champ at the halfway point, I'll have to say, just going screen time alone, rookie year, as I mentioned, 213. So we're looking at the Ashley and Jane and Emil having a better rookie year than Bowen. And I think it would be crazy to say that any of the three of them right now could be the next Bowen Yang. It's definitely possible, but up to a 247 in the COVID year. Then he has a big jump, like I mentioned with the Chloe jump when they got the upgrade, 334. And then the last three seasons, 643, 551, 636. So we've actually seen more Bowen in season 48 as far as screen time. Of course, that's not an election year, so that's definitely a factor. JD Vance aside, but I think that this is somebody that, if he talk about all these departures and speculation, would be someone absolutely leaving on top, which we don't always see, because let's face it, Bowen has not been on the show in the cast that long. Like I haven't heard a lot of people say like, oh, he's been there forever, it's time to go. So I don't know, John, we don't talk about that enough. I think about people who actually get to that peak and it stays there and they leave, or, it's going to fall off. Maybe we talk about Mikey and Kenan earlier tonight, but it's kind of my final thought on Bowen is that he's somebody who's consistently been a star for 3 years. And now he's like officially that with the numbers that we see.
Yeah, I just think it's because he's like a little bit of a polarizing performer. And it's, with him being so tapped into pop culture and being the face of a new generation of the show, where he is like bringing in stuff to the show, i.e. that Trisha Paytas sketch, for example, that is different than what we've seen other stars of the show that are so like, of their eras. I think that because of that, it's hard to get a full grasp and analysis on him. I do think that whether he stays or goes, I think that if he keeps this up for the rest of season 50, in 5 or 10 years from now, we'll look back and be really, really impressed with Bowen. But I also don't know if he has had a moment this season that has like really permeated the culture, or just like gone outside the show where everyone's like, oh my God, I have to see what Bowen Yang is doing on the show. I've been tapped out of SNL for 10 years and I just saw this one sketch and saw how brilliant Bowen is. And now I have to jump back in the way that they did with Will Ferrell or Kate McKinnon or Kristen Wiig, like some of the other people that he's being compared to, where it's like, whoa, SNL has a superstar on their hands.
I think that's totally fair. Again, mentioning that his just likability has been a huge for him. And, I'm talking about Charlie XCX, Ariana Grande, he's been friendly with Taylor in the past, and like A-listers of a younger generation. And his podcast, Las Culturistas, which is, I think there's a lot of people who listen to that podcast that might not even watch SNL. So like there's people that know Bowen outside, and I think what he's doing is, we can look back at his career as been like super smart SNL career. So shout out to Bowen for that. And he had such a big lead that I think, I can't call it that he's going to finish number 1, but he's going to be tough to beat. So
one more thing I'd just like to say about Bowen before we
please
wrap today. And I know we've been going really long time. So Dennis, thanks so much for your stamina and all this. And I'm looking forward to wrapping up our discussion today. But I just want to, I want to say that I would have been fascinated to see Bowen Yang on Saturday Night Live in a world where social media doesn't exist. And I know we're talking about a huge hypothetical here, but Bowen's popularity, following, all the stuff, the fact that SNL cast members don't need Saturday Night Live to make a name for themselves now. You can make it on your own with the invention of social media, to me has changed the game for a lot of these people. So Bowen being one of them, who is both a star on the show and a star off the show. And I'm so curious, like in his 5th season in 1995 or 1985 or 2005, like is he dominating in the way that he is, or is because he is such a star outside the show that the show is absolutely compelled to put him in this position? And I just think that's something that we will think about and talk about, especially as we head towards the end of his career.
Absolutely. I mean, it's very hard to say. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention, about being openly gay, about being coming from the writer's room and having a perspective that's unique, and having, we had Kate for a bit, and we've had, others, but bringing in a angle that we just didn't see in other eras, let's be honest. So totally. It's very hard to imagine Bowen Yang doing a lot of gay cultural references in the Sandler Farley years. Like I can't see it. So
right.
And we wouldn't want that for him. That's
right,
just to go back to my point. It's just something to think about when we're trying to grasp of like, when we're looking at all of these 17 cast members throughout the night tonight, we are making some historical comparisons. And now we are talking about Bowen, who is the star of this season. And we have to start talking about comparing about where does he fit among the stars in the history of the show.
100%. Well, there you have it. If you've stuck around and seen all 17 slides, then we thank you very much. We have 10 more to go, so there's going to be a lot of movement. This has definitely, for me, been the most fulfilling, exciting stat year of SNL. I can't wait to see where it goes from here because the movement has been week to week more than we've ever seen. So we came in and we saw we weren't having these conversations about is Beck Bennett the breakout star? Like his stats were huge, but we didn't have those talks. So I'm glad we had Dennis on along with us to give some points that maybe you're sick of me and John saying the same stuff. So thank you very much, Dennis, and please tell us where to check you out and hear more from you because I'd love people to do that.
Well, this has been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you so much. I'm writing for Late Nighter. That's where my SNL reviews live these days. So shout out to our shared parent website. If you want to find me, I just finally ditched Facebook because Zuckerberg can bite it. So and I ditched Twitter a while ago, really. So Blue Sky, Dennis Perkins 5 of Blue Sky.
Thank you so much. And, great segue because this podcast is a presentation of latenighter.com. So if you want to, you can find our podcast there. You can find us on social media at the SNL Network. So, and you can find Dennis on latenighter.com. So I look forward to, honestly, I look forward to your Chappelle review. I'm not going to lie. So I'll be checking that out.
Thanks,
John, when can we find season 20 of Everything You Need to Know About SNL? Because I was watching a few of them last night. I had to rewatch season 18, 19, and season 20 is such a fun one. So that and everything else we have going on at the network, let us know.
Fun one, a little bit of a cluster F. I mean, it's a very interesting season. So we're working on that. Hopefully that'll be out in the next couple of weeks for you. So I'm looking forward to putting that out. I love getting to do this show here tonight, the Midseason by the Numbers show. It's the 5th year that we've been doing this, and it always hypes me up so much for the rest of the season. I feel like we talked about every single person. I can't wait to see what they're going to do for the rest of the year. So this has been an absolute blast getting to do this with you, Mike, and you, Dennis. Of course, we will be here all week long for coverage of the Dave Chappelle and Glorilla episode. And, if you love Dave and you're excited to watch the episode, good for you. And if this is not one for you and you want to just take the next bus, you can skip this one. That's totally okay. Nobody's forcing you to watch the show this weekend. That's fine. We will still be here to cover it. So for those who maybe don't want to watch the show and want to just hang out with us on the podcast and hear what happened and talk about what's going on, we will gladly, I'll do a little bit of extra work this week to sort of paint the picture of what we ended up seeing on the show for those who may not be totally tapped into it. But of course, we will be here for the Hot Take show on Saturday. Next Monday for our roundtable, we'll be back with our regular schedule. And then, of course, By the Numbers. Same thing for the Timmy Chalamet double duty episode. And then we'll have some fun stuff preparing for the biggest night in SNL history, SNL 50, which is just around the corner, a little over 1 month away here, Mike.
I can't wait. It's been really fun. I've just been little by little doing the stats for SNL 40. So we will have them for you. We will talk about them. You'll find them on social media. So a lot of names to cover. And it's just been fun for me because I remember watching SNL 40 live. And, John, a big part of your origin story was watching that live. And just seeing what they accomplished that night was so huge and just interesting. I think they got a 10 out of 10 from me. So imagining SNL 50 to not repeat a lot of what they did because they really had a hit on so much history. And, of course, we got to account for the last 10 years of SNL that didn't exist then. But very exciting for me to finally rewatch SNL 40 and cover it from a stat angle. So I can't wait to discuss that with you guys. And thank you, as always, to the listeners. And I can't wait. More SNL coming up in 2025. And that's about it for us. So I'll see you next Wednesday, regular time. That's going to be 8 p.m. Eastern with some great guests. And we will be covering the Chappelle episode. So for Jon Schneider, Dennis Perkins, we will see you all very soon. Thank you for watching and listening.